The water burst from solid rock on the seventh day, but that miracle came too late to save them from what happened next. In 1887, a dying rancher made a deal that brought a stranger in crimson across an ocean of dust. She wasn't supposed to survive 3 days in Blackstone Valley. She wasn't supposed to tame a killer horse with whispered words or find water where the earth had been dead for generations. And she definitely wasn't supposed to make the entire frontier question everything they thought they knew about survival, power, and who deserved to be called American. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The smell hit Caleb Mercer before he even opened his eyes, rot and failure mixing with the alkaline dust that crept through every crack in the ranch house walls. He lay there in the gray pre-dawn, listening to the wind scrape across dead earth, and tried to remember what hope felt like. 43 years old, widower, childless, drowning in debt to men who smiled while they calculated how soon they could carve up his land. The Blackstone Valley drought had entered its third summer, and everyone knew what that meant. You could see it in the abandoned homesteads dotting the territory like tombstones. You could hear it in the silence where cattle used to low. The valley was dying, and Caleb Mercer was dying with it. He forced himself upright, joints cracking, and looked at the calendar nailed to the wall. August 3rd, 1887. The day everything changed, though he didn't know it yet. The day she arrived. Caleb splashed water from the basin across his face, precious water, rationed like gold, and caught his reflection in the cracked mirror. Hollow cheeks, eyes that had forgotten how to focus on anything except the next disaster. His wife Sarah used to say he had kind eyes, but Sarah had been dead 4 years now, buried under the cottonwood tree that had also died, roots strangled by drought. The house still smelled like her sometimes. Lilac soap and bread dough. Then the wind would shift, and he'd smell only dust again, and he'd remember that the dead don't linger. They just leave you behind to figure out how to keep breathing. "You're a damn fool, Mercer," he muttered, pulling on his boots. But he was a damn fool who'd run out of options. 6 months ago, drunk on rot-gut whiskey and desperation, he'd done something he swore he'd never do. He'd signed papers with an agency out of San Francisco. The kind of agency that arranged marriages for men too broken or too remote to find wives the normal way. Picture brides, they called them, though Caleb never saw any pictures. Just a contract promising him a hard-working woman of good moral character, willing to relocate for the purposes of matrimony and partnership. He'd filled out the forms in a whiskey haze, barely remembering what he'd written. Age, not important. Appearance, not important. Religion, not important. All that mattered was someone strong enough to survive what was coming, because Caleb knew, bone deep, certainty cold, that he couldn't survive it alone. The agency took his money, sent back a single letter 3 weeks later. Arrangements made. Bride arrives August 3rd, Bridgeport Station, 2 p.m. No name, no details. Just a date, and a time, and a future Caleb couldn't quite imagine. He told exactly 2 people, his ranch foreman Dutch and the county clerk who'd filed the marriage license. Dutch had looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're bringing some stranger out here? To this?" He gestured at the cracked earth, the skeletal cattle, the slow-motion collapse of everything they'd built. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Caleb didn't have an answer then. He didn't have one now. He walked outside into air that already tasted like copper and heat. The sun wasn't even up yet, but the temperature had to be near 80. By noon it had hit 115, same as yesterday, same as the day before. The earth had cracked into geometric patterns, nature's way of showing you exactly how broken things were. The barn leaned worse than last week. The windmill that used to pump water from the well sat frozen, blades motionless in the dead air. 3 skeletal cattle stared at him from the corral, ribs showing through hide like prison bars. This was the empire he'd built. This was what he had to offer. Dutch emerged from the bunkhouse, moving like a man twice his 60 years. "Today's the day." "Huh?" "Yeah." "You know what you're going to say to her?" "No, so..." "You know what she's going to say when she sees this place?" "No." Dutch spat into the dust. "Well, at least you're honest about being a damn fool." He paused. "Want me to ride into town with you?" Caleb shook his head. "This is my mess. I'll handle it." "Suit yourself." Dutch started toward the barn, then stopped. "Mercer, whatever happens today, Don't let them make it worse than it has to be. Them? The whole goddamn town. They're going to be watching, judging. You know how they are. Dutch's jaw worked. And if she's different, they're going to eat you both alive. Caleb felt something cold settle in his gut. He hadn't thought about that. Hadn't thought about much beyond survival. Different how? But Dutch just shook his head and walked away. The ride into Bridgeport took 3 hours across terrain that used to be prairie grass and wildflowers. Now it looked like the surface of some dead planet, colorless, lifeless, waiting for the final nail in the coffin. Caleb passed the Morrison Ranch around mile marker 7. The house stood empty, windows dark, front door hanging open like a mouth mid-scream. The Morrisons had left 2 months ago, abandoning everything, just packed what they could carry and ran. Caleb had watched them go, part of him envious, part of him knowing he'd never have the courage to quit. This land had killed his wife. It was killing him, but he couldn't leave. Maybe that made him loyal. Maybe it just made him stupid. Bridgeport appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a collection of weathered buildings hunched against the endless sky. Population 300 and dropping. The kind of town where everyone knew your business before you did, and they'd already decided how your story ended. Caleb tied his horse outside the station at 1:47 p.m. Early. He considered waiting on the horse, maybe riding around the block a few times, anything to delay the moment when this became real. But then he saw the crowd. At least 40 people had gathered near the platform. Ranchers, shop owners, their wives, kids running underfoot, all of them trying to look casual, like they just happened to be at the station on a Tuesday afternoon in August, when there was nothing else to do and the crops were dead and the future looked like ash. They were there to watch Caleb Mercer collect his mail-order bride. He recognized most of them. Harvey Pike, who owned the biggest spread in the valley and never let anyone forget it. Martha Hendricks, the banker's wife, who'd made it her life's mission to know everyone's secrets. Tom Chen, who ran the general store and was the only Chinese person in Bridgeport. Until today, maybe. Tom caught Caleb's eye and gave a small nod. No smile. Just acknowledgement. "Well, well," Harvey Pike drawled, loud enough for half the platform to hear. "Mercer actually showed up. Thought you might come to your senses and hide." Caleb kept walking. "Don't engage. Don't give them ammunition." "What'd you order, Mercer?" Another voice, younger. Billy Sutton, Harvey's idiot nephew. "They got a catalog? You pick her out by the pound?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Caleb's hands curled into fists, but he kept moving toward the station office. Behind him, someone else chimed in. "Heard they shipped her from San Francisco. That's where they keep the leftovers, ain't it?" More laughter. Martha Hendricks appeared at his elbow, smiling like a cat with cream. "Caleb, dear, we're all just so excited to meet your bride." The pause before the word made it sound dirty. "It's so brave of you to try something so unconventional." "It's pathetic," Harvey Pike said. "That's what it is. Man can't even find a wife the normal way. He's got to order one like a goddamn—" "Harvey!" Tom Chen's voice cut through the noise. Quiet but firm. "Leave him alone." Harvey turned, grinning. "Oh, I forgot. You got opinions about this, don't you, Tom? Being from the Orient yourself and all." "I'm from Sacramento." "Same difference." The laughter that followed had edges now, sharper, meaner. Caleb wanted to say something. Stand up for Tom. Stand up for himself. Do something other than stand there absorbing the mockery like he deserved it. But then the station master stepped out of the office, checking his pocket watch. "Train's on time, 3 minutes out." The platform went silent. Caleb felt every eye shift to him, felt the weight of their expectations, their judgment, their certainty that whatever was about to happen would be entertaining at his expense. He heard the train before he saw it. A low whistle cutting through the dead air, then the rumble of steel on steel. The locomotive appeared around the eastern bend, trailing smoke and cinders, pulling 4 passenger cars and a freight section. It slowed, stopped. Steam hissed from the brakes. The conductor stepped down first, helping passengers off. An older couple, a salesman with the sample case. 2 young men who looked like cowboys heading west. Then nothing. The crowd started murmuring. Someone laughed. "Maybe she didn't show," Billy Sutton said. "Maybe she took one look at where she was going and jumped off 3 towns back." More laughter. Caleb felt his face burning. felt the humiliation crawling up his spine like fire ants. Then the conductor reached back into the car, offering his hand to someone still inside. And everything stopped. She emerged slowly, one hand gripping the conductor's, the other holding a small canvas bag. She wore a dress the color of fresh blood, deep crimson silk that caught the afternoon light and held it. Her black hair was pulled back severe and tight, revealing a face that looked carved from pale stone. Young, maybe 25, small-framed but not fragile. There was something in the way she held herself, in the set of her shoulders, that made fragile seem like the wrong word entirely. She was Chinese. The platform went dead silent. Caleb felt the world tilt sideways. The agency hadn't mentioned this, hadn't said anything about. He looked at her again, really looked, and saw her taking in the crowd with dark eyes that revealed nothing. Not fear, not hope, just assessment. Someone in the crowd said, "Jesus Christ." Someone else. "He ordered a Chinaman? That ain't a man, you idiot." "Close enough." The laughter now had poison in it. Caleb forced his feet to move, forced himself to walk toward her, even though every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to make this stop before it got worse. She saw him coming. Their eyes met. Up close, he could see details the distance had hidden. Calluses on her hands, a small scar above her left eyebrow, dust on her dress from the journey. She looked exhausted and alert at the same time, like someone who'd learned to sleep with one eye open. "Liancho?" she said. Her English carried an accent but was clear, precise. "You are Caleb Mercer?" His mouth had gone dry. "Yes." She studied him for a moment that felt like an hour. Then she held out one hand, not for him to shake, but for him to take. An old gesture, formal, from a world he didn't understand. He took her hand. It was small and warm and stronger than he expected. Behind them, Harvey Pike said loudly, "Well, I'll be damned. Mercer's gone and bought himself a celestial. What's next? You gonna start smoking opium and worshipping dragons?" The crowd erupted in laughter. Caleb felt Leon's hand tighten in his, felt her whole body go rigid. But when he looked at her face, it remained perfectly smooth, perfectly controlled. "We should go," she said quietly. "Yeah." His voice came out rough. "Yeah, we should. He picked up her bag, surprisingly light, like she'd traveled with almost nothing, and started toward where his horse was tied. The crowd parted for them, but barely, close enough that he could hear the whispers, the comments, the casual cruelty people deployed when they forgot other people could hear them. "She's probably a whore. I heard they eat rats in China. Look at that dress. She thinks she's somebody." Caleb kept walking. Leon walked beside him, head up, spine straight, that crimson dress moving like fire in the corner of his vision. They reached the horse. He tied her bag to the saddle, then realized the problem. He only had one horse, and she'd have to ride with him. Behind him, pressed close. "We'll have to ride double," he said. "It's 3 hours back to the ranch." "That is acceptable." He mounted first, then reached down to help her up. She ignored his hand, grabbed the saddle horn, and swung up behind him with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. The dress rode up slightly, revealing worn boots underneath. Working boots. Caleb kicked the horse into motion, aware of her arms wrapping around his waist for balance, aware of the entire town watching them leave, aware that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand. They rode in silence for the first hour. The town disappeared behind them. The landscape opened up into its familiar desolation. Cracked earth, dead grass, heat shimmer on the horizon. Caleb wanted to say something, anything, but every sentence that formed in his head sounded wrong. "I didn't know you'd be Chinese. The agency didn't tell me. This is going to be harder than I thought." All of it sounded like excuses or accusations, so he said nothing. Finally, Leon spoke. "How many cattle?" The question caught him off guard. "What? On your ranch? How many cattle do you have?" 16. We started with 200, but the drought... Water source? "Well, dry for 3 months now. We're hauling from Bridgeport twice a week." "Crops?" "Dead." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Why did you send for a wife?" The blunt question hit him like a fist. He opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, "I needed help." "You could have hired a ranch hand. Couldn't afford one. But you could afford a wife? The agency. They took payments. Another silence. Then quietly, so I am a purchase. That's not... I didn't mean... He fumbled for words. It's not like that. What is it like? He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, and none of them sounded like anything except a man making excuses for his own desperation. I'm dying out here, he said finally. Raw. Honest. The ranch is dying. Everything's dying. I couldn't do it alone anymore. He felt her arms tighten slightly around his waist, felt her head tilt, like she was looking at the landscape he'd just described. How long? She asked. How long what? How long have you been alone? 4 years. My wife died in childbirth. Baby too. He'd never said it that plainly before, never just laid it out without softening the edges or changing the subject. But something about this woman, this stranger pressed against his back, made honesty feel like the only option. I'm sorry, Leon said. Yeah, me too. They rode on. The sun crawled across the sky, baking them both. Caleb felt sweat soaking through his shirt, felt Leon shifting occasionally behind him, trying to find a comfortable position on the hard saddle. Once her hand slipped and she grabbed his shoulder for balance, fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. Sorry, she murmured. It's fine. Around the 2-hour mark, they passed what used to be the Garrett homestead, another abandoned house, another family that couldn't take it anymore. The door stood open, and Caleb could see furniture still inside. A table, chairs, too heavy to carry when you were running for your life. Many people left? Leon asked. Yeah, half the valley in the last year. But not you. No. Why? He thought about that, really thought about it. This is all I have, all I am. If I leave, I don't know who I'd be. So you will die here instead? The question should have sounded cruel, but it didn't. It sounded curious, like she genuinely wanted to understand his logic. Maybe, he said. Probably. Unless something changes. I am the something, Leon said. Not a question, a statement. I guess so. That is a lot of pressure to put on a stranger. He almost laughed. Almost. Yeah, I suppose it is. The ranch appeared on the horizon just after 5 p.m., a collection of weathered buildings that looked even worse from a distance. The main house sagging in the middle, the barn with half its roof gone, corrals made of scrap wood and hope. 3 skeletal cattle that looked up as they approached, then lost interest and went back to staring at nothing. Caleb felt Leanne go very still behind him. This was the moment when she'd see what she'd actually agreed to, when the reality would hit and she'd realize she'd made a terrible mistake. He stopped the horse in front of the house and dismounted, then reached up to help her down. This time she took his hand, sliding off the horse with that same economical grace she'd shown at the station. She stood in the dust, looking around slowly. The house, the barn, the dead fields stretching toward distant ridges, the windmill that didn't turn, the well with a rope hanging into darkness. Caleb waited for the tears, the accusations, the demands to be taken back to town immediately. Instead, Leon walked over to the well and looked down into it. Dropped a pebble. Counted silently. Deep, she said, 40 feet, maybe more. Yeah, drilled it myself 6 years ago. Went dry in May, yes. She moved to the nearest fence post, testing it with her hand. It wobbled. She frowned, then walked to the next post. Same result. Termites? Some, mostly just old. She continued her inspection, circling the property like a surveyor, touching things, testing things, asking questions. Where does water collect when it rains? Which direction does the wind usually come from? How old is the house? Caleb followed her, answering when he could, watching her process information with the focused intensity of someone solving a complex problem. Finally, she stopped in front of the house and looked at him directly. This is very bad, she said. I know. You will lose everything soon. I know. Why did you not leave already? I told you. This is all I... No. She cut him off. That is not a reason. That is fear disguised as loyalty. Her dark eyes held his. Tell me the real reason. Us. Caleb felt something crack inside his chest, felt 4 years of carefully maintained walls starting to crumble. Because if I leave, he said quietly, then she died for nothing. My wife. She believed in this place, believed we could build something that mattered. And if I walk away, if I let it all turn to dust, then her death was just pointless. She died for a dream that couldn't survive. The words hung in the air between them. Lynn studied him for a long moment. Then she picked up her canvas bag and walked toward the house. We should see inside, she said, before it gets dark. The house was worse inside. Caleb knew that. He'd been living in the disaster for months, watching it slowly deteriorate around him. But seeing it through Leon's eyes, through the eyes of someone experiencing it for the first time, made him aware of every broken thing, every failure, every piece of evidence that he'd given up trying. Dishes piled in the wash basin, weeks old, dust coating every surface, a table covered in scattered papers and empty whiskey bottles, broken chair legs used as kindling, the bedroom door hanging crooked on one hinge. Leon moved through the space silently, taking inventory. She opened cabinets, finding them mostly empty, checked the stove, which was cold and full of ash, looked at the floor, where boards had warped and cracked. In the bedroom, she found the bed, unmade, sheets gray with dirt, and the single window with a cracked pane. She set her bag down carefully. You sleep here, she said. Statement, not question. Yeah. Where will I sleep? The question hit him like cold water. He hadn't thought about it, hadn't thought about any of the practical realities of another person living here. I can sleep in the bunkhouse with Dutch. You can have the bedroom. But, she looked at him for a long moment. We are married, yes? Legally, yes. I signed the papers. You signed the papers. But not. She searched for the word. Truly? Not truly, he agreed. Not unless you want. He stopped, feeling his face burn. What I mean is, I'm not expecting anything. We can figure this out as we go. Leon nodded slowly. That is good. I am not ready for. She gestured vaguely at the bed. That? Understood. But I will not take your bed. We will share it, with a line of blankets between us, like a wall. Her expression was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing crop rotation. That is how it works where I come from, when a marriage is new and trust is not yet built. Caleb had no idea if that was true or if she was making it up, but he nodded anyway. Okay, first I will clean, Leon said. She looked around the room with an expression that might have been disgust or might have been determination. All of it. This house is disrespectful to your wife's memory. The words hit him harder than any insult Harvey Pike had thrown. Because she was right. He'd let everything Sarah cared about fall apart, let her house become a tomb for his grief. I'll help, he said. No, you will feed the cattle, then fix the fence posts I saw, then check the barn for structural damage. She started rolling up her sleeves. I will handle the house. Leanne, you just traveled for. I do not need rest. I need to work. She looked at him directly. This is what I came here to do, yes? Work. So I will work. Will. There was something in her voice that made argument impossible. Not anger exactly, just absolute certainty. So Caleb left her there and went to deal with the cattle. By the time he finished the evening feeding and started on the fence posts, the sun was setting. He worked in the fading light, digging out rotted posts and replacing them with spare wood he'd been hoarding. His hands had gone soft over the months of barely surviving. Blisters formed quickly, then burst, then bled. He ignored them. Behind him, light spilled from the house windows. He could hear sounds. Scraping, splashing, the thump of furniture being moved. Once he heard Leanne singing something in Chinese, her voice carrying across the empty land. It was the first time in 4 years that the ranch had sounded alive after dark. Dutch appeared around 8 p.m., returning from Bridgeport with the weekly water barrels. He pulled the wagon to a stop and sat there for a moment, staring at the lit house. So she stayed, he said finally. So far. What's she like? Caleb thought about that. Honest, strong, doesn't waste words. Pretty? That's not. That's not relevant, Dutch snorted. Sure it ain't. He climbed down from the wagon. Tom Chen came by the bunkhouse while I was loading up. Wanted me to tell you something. What? Said to watch your back. Said people in town are already talking, making plans. Caleb felt cold settle in his gut. What kind of plans? The kind where they decide you've crossed a line they didn't know existed until you crossed it. Dutch started unhitching the horses. Harvey Pike's already calling her your celestial whore. Martha Hendricks is organizing some kind of church women's committee to examine the moral character of the arrangement. And Billy Sutton got drunk and started talking about teaching you both a lesson. Billy's an idiot. Billy's an idiot with friends and a rifle. Dutch met his eyes. I'm just saying, be careful. Caleb looked back at the house, where Lion was doing something that involved moving furniture and possibly breaking things. She's my wife, he said. Legal and proper. They can do whatever they want, and you know it. Dutch's voice went hard. This is Blackstone Valley. We're 3 days from the nearest federal marshal. The law is whatever Harvey Pike says it is. And right now, Harvey Pike is pissed because you made him look like a fool by bringing in a woman who's tougher than his whole crew. I didn't bring her here to make anyone look like anything. Doesn't matter. That's what happened. Dutch finished with the horses and started toward the bunkhouse. Just be smart, Mercer. Don't give them an excuse. He left Caleb standing in the dark, bleeding hands hanging at his sides, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so complicated so fast. When he finally went back inside around 10 p.m., he stopped in the doorway and stared. The house was transformed. Not perfect. Still old, still weathered, but clean. The dishes washed and stacked. The floor swept and scrubbed. The table cleared and wiped down. The stove cleaned out and ready for a new fire. Even the bedroom looked different. Bed made with hospital corners. Window repaired with cloth and pitch. The warped board swept clean. Leanne stood in the kitchen, heating water over a hastily built fire. She'd changed out of the crimson dress into simple work clothes, dark pants and a loose shirt that looked almost masculine. Her hair was damp with sweat, her face flushed from exertion. She looked up when he entered. There's rice, she said, pointing to a pot, and dried vegetables I found in the cellar. Not much, but enough. You didn't have to vote? Yes, I did. She ladled rice into 2 bowls, added vegetables, and brought them to the table. Sit. They ate in silence. The food was simple, but better than anything Caleb had made himself in months. The rice was cooked perfectly, and somehow she'd made the dried vegetables taste almost fresh. Where'd you learn to cook like this? He asked. My mother, before she died. I'm sorry. Leanne shrugged. It was long ago, in another country. How long have you been in America? 3 years. I came from Guangdong province. Worked in San Francisco for 2 years, then Sacramento for 1. She ate methodically, efficiently. I saved money. Sent for my younger brother. Then I saw the agency advertisement. Why? She looked at him. Why did you answer the advertisement? I needed help. So did I. She set down her bowl. In San Francisco, I worked in a laundry. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The owner took half my pay for room and board in a space smaller than your pantry. In Sacramento, I cleaned houses for families who would not let me use the front door. Her voice remained flat, factual. The agency offered something different, a chance to own something, build something, even if it was with a stranger in a dying valley. Caleb felt something shift in his understanding. So we're both desperate. Yes. She almost smiled. That is honest, at least. They finished eating. Leanne washed the bowls while Caleb stared at his hands, watching blood seep through the broken blisters. You should wrap those, Leanne said without looking at him. They're fine. They will get infected. I said they're fine. Eat. She turned, drying her hands on a cloth, crossed the room and grabbed his wrist before he could pull away. Studied his ruined palms with the same focused intensity she'd applied to everything else. You are lying, she said. These are very bad. She disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a small cloth bag from her canvas sack. Inside, clean bandages, a jar of something that looked like salve, a needle, and thread. She worked quickly, cleaning the worst wounds with heated water, applying the salve, wrapping his hands in strips of clean cloth. Her touch was impersonal, efficient, like she'd done this 100 times before. "Where'd you learn this?" Caleb asked. "My father. He worked on canal projects. Men got hurt constantly." She tied off the bandage. "He said a good worker knows how to fix themselves." "Was he a doctor?" "He was an engineer, but in China, engineers must know many things." She finished the second hand. "There. Do not get them wet for 2 days. I have work to do. Then wear gloves, or let the work wait." She started to turn away, then stopped. "Your wife. What was her name?" The question caught him off guard. "Sarah." "Sarah," Leon repeated, testing the name. "What was she like? Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm sleeping in her house, using her kitchen. I should know who she was." Caleb thought about it, really thought about it for the first time in months. She was kind, patient, better than I deserved. He paused. She never complained. Even when things got hard, she just kept going, kept believing we could make it work. She sounds strong. She was. Then I will try to honor her memory by being strong also. Leon started toward the bedroom. "We should sleep now. Tomorrow will be difficult." Caleb followed her, still processing everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. The bedroom looked different now. Clean, organized, with a line of folded blankets running down the middle of the bed like a fabric wall. Leon climbed in on the left side, fully dressed, turned her back to the center line. "Good night, Caleb Mercer," she said. He climbed in on the right side, also fully dressed, stared at the ceiling. "Good night, Lian Zhao." The house settled around them. Wind scraped across the roof. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Caleb lay there thinking about everything that had gone wrong, everything that could still go wrong, all the ways this could end in disaster. But for the first time in 4 years, he wasn't sleeping alone. And against every logical thought, every reasonable expectation that felt like something close to hope, Caleb woke to the sound of metal scraping against stone. For a confused moment, he thought he'd dreamed the entire previous day. The station, the woman in red, all of it. Just another fever hallucination brought on by too much sun and not enough hope. But then he rolled over and saw the empty space on the other side of the blanket wall, saw the depression in the pillow where someone else's head had been, and reality crashed back. The scraping sound continued from outside, rhythmic, determined. He dragged himself out of bed, every muscle protesting. His wrapped hands throbbed. The clock on the wall read 4:47 a.m. Still dark outside, the sun not even thinking about rising yet. He stumbled to the window and looked out. Leon was in the yard, digging. She'd found a shovel somewhere and was working on what looked like a trench running from the well toward the house. Even in the pre-dawn gray, he could see she'd already moved an impressive amount of dirt. She worked with mechanical efficiency, driving the shovel down, lifting, tossing the earth aside, repeat. Still wearing those same work clothes from last night, hair tied back with a strip of cloth. Caleb pulled on his boots and went outside. "What are you doing?" She didn't stop digging. "Making a path for when the well works again." "The well's dry." "Now it is dry. Later it may not be." Another shovel full of dirt joined the pile. "Better to prepare while there is time." "Leanne, it's not even 5 in the morning." "Yes, I started at 4. She finally paused, leaning on the shovel. Sweat already dampened her collar despite the cool air. "I could not sleep. In San Francisco, work started at 4. My body remembers." "Whoa." Caleb watched her drive the shovel down again, and something about the sight made his chest hurt. This woman had been here less than 24 hours, and she was already working harder than he'd worked in months. "You should rest," he said. "You just got here." "Rest is for when the work is finished." She looked at him. "Your hands, are they worse?" He'd forgotten about the bandages. "They're fine." "Show me." "Lien, show me." He held out his hands. The bandages had come loose on one side, dark spots where blood had seeped through. She made a disgusted sound. "I told you to keep them dry." "I washed my face." "Idiot." She dropped the shovel and grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward the house. Come, I will fix them again. I have cattle to feed. The cattle can wait 10 minutes. She dragged him inside with surprising strength for someone so small. Sit. Massambossen. He sat. She unwrapped the bandages with quick, efficient movements that still somehow managed to hurt like hell. The blisters looked worse than yesterday. Angrier, more swollen. One had definitely started to infect. This is why you listen, Lian muttered. She retrieved her bag again, pulled out a small glass bottle filled with clear liquid. This will hurt. What is it? Rice wine, very strong. She uncorked it and poured it directly onto the infected blister. Caleb sucked in a breath through his teeth, vision going white at the edges. I told you it would hurt, Leon said, no sympathy in her voice. She worked quickly, cleaning the wounds, applying fresh salve, rewrapping everything tighter this time. There. Now you will actually keep them dry, yes? Yes. Good. She corked the bottle and put it away. I made congee, rice porridge. You will eat, then work on the barn roof. I saw missing boards. How did you eat? I inspected while you were sleeping. She ladled thick white porridge into a bowl, added something from a small jar, dried fish maybe, and set it in front of him. Eat! The porridge was plain but filling, salty from the fish, warm in a way that felt almost medicinal. Caleb ate while Lion moved around the kitchen, organizing things, making lists on a scrap of paper with a pencil stub. I need to go to town today, she said without looking up. Caleb's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. What? Town, Bridgeport. I need supplies. That's not a good idea. Why not? He set down the spoon. Because of yesterday. Because of how people reacted. It's going to be worse now that they've had time to talk about it, spread rumors, work themselves up. Leon looked at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. And so I should hide? Stay on the ranch like a prisoner? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He struggled for words. I mean, it's going to be hard. They're going to say things, do things, and I can't protect you from all of it. I do not need protection. She went back to her list. I need flour, salt, beans, cooking oil, nails, lumber, and wire mesh. Also seeds if the store has any that will grow in drought. Leanne, I'm going to town, Caleb. With you or without you. It is easier with you because you have a wagon and I do not. She looked up again. Which will it be? Dutch chose that moment to knock on the door. He entered without waiting for an answer, stopped when he saw Leon, and quickly removed his hat. Ma'am, he said awkwardly. Then to Caleb, we got a problem with the north fence. Something broke through last night. Maybe coyotes. Maybe something bigger. 3 posts down. Caleb stood. I'll deal with it. Caleb. I can handle it, Dutch said, but I figured you should know. He glanced at Leon, then back to Caleb. Also, Tom Chen came by early this morning, before dawn, said to tell you that Harvey Pike's been drinking at the saloon since yesterday evening, making threats. What kind of threats? The kind about teaching foreigners their place, about showing people what happens when you disrespect the valley. Dutch twisted his hat in his hands. Tom thought you should know. Dutch twisted his hat in. Thought maybe you'd want to keep Mrs. Mercer here on the ranch for a few days. Let things cool down. Leon crossed her arms. Mrs. Mercer needs supplies. Dutch blinked. Ma'am, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. Her voice stayed level, but something sharp edged underneath. Men in town are upset because I exist. Because I am Chinese and I married a white man and this offends them somehow. Yes? Well, yes, ma'am. That's about the size of it. Then they will have to stay upset. She turned to Caleb. We leave in 1 hour. That gives you time to fix the fence. Dutch looked at Caleb like he was watching a man walk off a cliff. Caleb looked at Leanne, who stared back with absolute certainty. 1 hour? Caleb said finally. Dutch shook his head and left, muttering something about fools and death wishes. The fence repair took 45 minutes. Caleb worked fast, ignoring the pain in his hands, trying not to think about what was going to happen when they rolled into Bridgeport. Leanne spent the time reorganizing the barn, sweeping out years of accumulated debris, and somehow finding enough scrap lumber to patch 2 holes in the wall. When Caleb hitched up the wagon, she was waiting with her list in a small cloth purse that clinked like it held coins. "Where'd you get money?" he asked. "I saved it, from San Francisco and Sacramento." She climbed onto the wagon seat. "This is my money, for supplies I need. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." She settled her skirts. "I will not be a burden who takes and gives nothing back." The ride into town felt different from yesterday's journey. Morning light instead of afternoon. Leon sitting beside him instead of pressed against his back. And the silence between them was less awkward now, more like 2 people comfortable enough not to fill every gap with words. Around the 2-hour mark, Leon spoke. "Tell me about the valley, before the drought." Caleb thought back. It felt like remembering a different world. Green. Everything was green. Grass up to the horse's belly in spring. Wildflowers. Purple, yellow, red. Streams running clear and cold from the mountains. You could hear meadowlarks every morning, see pronghorn moving in herds. He paused. It was beautiful. Worth every hard thing we went through to build something here. Your wife saw this? Yeah, she loved it. Used to walk out into the fields just to, I don't know, be in it. He could see Sarah in his mind, dress swirling in prairie wind, laughing at something. She said it felt like freedom. And now? Now it feels like a graveyard. Oh, Lian nodded slowly. In Guangdong, we had a saying, "The land remembers water even when water forgets the land." It means that even in drought, the earth knows where the water should be. Where it used to flow, sometimes you can find it again if you listen. We drilled down 40 feet, hit bedrock. Maybe you drilled in the wrong place. There is no right place. The whole valley's drying up. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. When I was very young, my father took me to a village that had no water for 3 years. Everyone said the land was dead. But my father found an ancient streambed buried under 20 feet of earth. He followed it underground for half a mile and found a spring that saved the entire village. That's a nice story. Bam Titses. It is not a story. I was there. I helped dig. She turned back to the road ahead. What I am saying is that impossible things become possible when you refuse to believe they are impossible. That's just optimism talking. No, that is engineering talking. Engineering does not care about optimism. It cares about water, gravity, stone, and mathematics. But Caleb wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. Besides, they were approaching Bridgeport now, and he needed to focus on what was coming. The town looked the same as yesterday. Weathered buildings, dusty streets, heat already building even though it was barely 10 a.m. But something felt different. Wrong. Too many people on the street for a Wednesday morning. Too many eyes turning their direction as the wagon rolled in. Caleb pulled up in front of the general store and set the brake. Stay close to me. I am not a child. I know, but stay close anyway. They climbed down together. Caleb could feel the stairs now, heavy and deliberate. A group of men stood outside the saloon despite the early hour. Harvey Pike among them, looking rough and angry. Billy Sutton beside him, grinning like he'd been waiting for this. Tom Chen appeared in the doorway of his store, face carefully neutral. Caleb, Mrs. Mercer. Tom. Caleb nodded. We need supplies. Of course, come in. But his eyes said, this is a mistake. You should not be here. Inside, the store smelled like coffee, leather, and dust. Leon immediately started moving through the aisles with her list, examining goods, checking prices. She handled everything with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Squeezing flour sacks to test freshness, shaking bean bags to judge quality, running her fingers over lumber to check for rot. Tom watched her with something like respect. She knows what she's doing. Yeah, Caleb said. She does. Caleb? Tom's voice dropped. I need to tell you something. Harvey's been organizing people, talking about setting an example, about how the valley can't let this kind of thing stand. Let what kind of thing stand? A legal marriage? A marriage between... Tom stopped himself. Look, I'm just telling you what I heard. He's got about a dozen men worked up and ready to make trouble, some of them talking about riding out to your ranch tonight. Cold fear settled in Caleb's gut. To do what? I don't know. Maybe just scare you. Maybe worse. Tom glanced toward where Leanne was examining seed packets. You should take her somewhere else. Maybe Sacramento. Maybe further. Somewhere they don't... No. Leanne's voice cut through the conversation. She'd apparently been listening the whole time. We do not run. She walked over carrying an armload of supplies. Set them on the counter with deliberate care. Tom looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, you don't understand how serious... I understand perfectly. She met his eyes. In San Francisco, white men threw stones at my laundry. In Sacramento, they burned down the building where I worked. I know exactly how serious men like Harvey Pike can be. She paused. Running did not help before. It will not help now. But no more talking about running. She pulled out her cloth purse. How much for the supplies? Tom calculated quickly, scribbling numbers on paper. That'll be $12.40 each. Leanne counted out coins carefully. Exact change. Tom started wrapping the goods, and Leanne went back for the lumber and other heavier items. Caleb helped her carry things to the wagon, very aware of the men still gathered across the street, still watching. Harvey Pike called out, Hey Mercer, that Celestial treating you right? Or does she need some lessons in American hospitality? Laughter from the group. Caleb kept loading supplies, jaw clenched. Don't engage. Don't give them what they want. I'm talking to you, Mercer. And I'm ignoring you, Harvey. That's disrespectful. Real disrespectful. Harvey's voice got louder, performing for the crowd. Maybe someone needs to teach you about respect. Leanne emerged from the store carrying a bag of flour. Harvey's eyes locked on her. Well now, there she is, the famous Chinese bride. He stepped into the street. Tell me something, girl. How much did Mercer pay for you? They got different prices depending on quality. Lynn set the flour in the wagon bed without responding. I'm talking to you. Harvey moved closer. Or do you not speak American? I speak English perfectly, Leanne said, still not looking at him. But I do not speak to drunks before noon. The men around Harvey made ooh sounds. Harvey's face went red. You got a smart mouth for someone who don't belong here. I belong where my husband is. That is how marriage works. Marriage? Harvey laughed, ugly and sharp. That ain't a marriage. I don't even know what that is. Some kind of barnyard arrangement. Caleb moved toward Harvey, hands curling into fists despite the bandages. That's enough. Or what? You gonna defend her honor? Harvey grinned. She got any honor to defend? Walk away, Harvey. Make me. The street went quiet. Everyone watching now, waiting to see if this would turn into the kind of moment that ended with blood on the ground. Caleb was bigger than Harvey, but older, worn down, hands barely functional. Harvey was mean and drunk and had 11 men behind him. The math wasn't good. Then Lion stepped between them. No, she said simply. Leanne, move. No. She looked at Caleb, then at Harvey. This is what he wants, to make you angry. To make you do something stupid so he has an excuse to hurt you, hurt us, hurt everything we are trying to build. She turned to Harvey. I will not give you that excuse. Harvey sneered. Listen to her, Mercer. Your woman's got more sense than you. She's right. Caleb forced his fist to unclench. You're not worth it. You're not... You're goddamn lucky I'm feeling generous today, Harvey said. But you should know. This ain't over. Not by a long shot. Valley's got standards. We can't just let anyone bring in any kind of... Harvey. Everyone turned. Martha Hendricks stood in the doorway of the church across the street, flanked by two other women. Her face was set as that particular expression of righteous disapproval she'd perfected over the years. This is unseemly, Martha said, harassing a woman in the street like some kind of ruffian. Harvey blinked. I'm just making it clear that you're making yourself look like a fool. Martha walked toward them, the other women following. Whatever your opinions about Mr. Mercer's choice of bride, this is not the way to express them. Since when do you care about, since we are attempting to maintain some level of civilization in this valley? Martha looked at Lion with an expression that wasn't friendly, but wasn't openly hostile either. Clinical assessment. Mrs. Mercer, is it? Yes. Mom. I am Martha Hendricks. I lead the Ladies' Auxiliary and organize the church social committee. She paused. We would like to invite you to tea on Friday afternoon, 2:00, at the church hall. The offer hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Leon studied Martha for a long moment. Why? Because it is what we do when someone new arrives in town. We welcome them properly. Martha's voice stayed neutral. Of course, if you prefer to remain isolated on the ranch. It was a trap. Caleb could see it clearly. Accept the invitation and subject yourself to hours of interrogation, judgment, and barely veiled insults. Decline and prove you're too foreign, too proud, too wrong for this valley. Leon must have seen it too because she took her time answering. I accept your invitation, she said finally. Friday at 2:00, thank you. Martha nodded, looking almost disappointed that Leanne hadn't refused. Excellent. We look forward to becoming better acquainted. She turned to Harvey. Now, if you gentlemen will excuse us, we have church business to attend to. She swept away, taking her moral authority with her. Harvey stood there looking frustrated, like someone had stolen his toy. This ain't over, he muttered. You said that already, Caleb replied. They finished loading the wagon in silence. The crowd slowly dispersed, the entertainment over. Tom Chin appeared one more time as they were preparing to leave. Be careful, he said quietly. Martha Hendricks isn't your friend. She's just making sure the bloodshed happens somewhere private instead of in the street where it looks bad. I know, Leon said, but I will go anyway. Why? Because refusing is the same as accepting that I do not belong. And I am tired of accepting that. Tom looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small paper package. This is ginger root. My mother used to make tea with it when my father had stomach problems from stress. He pressed it into Leon's hand. I think you might need it over the next few days. Leon's expression softened slightly. Thank you. Watch each other's backs, well, Tom said. Then he went back inside, leaving them alone in the street. The ride home was quiet for the first hour. Caleb kept checking over his shoulder, half expecting to see Harvey and his men following. But the road stayed empty behind them. Finally, Leon spoke. You should have hit him. Caleb looked at her surprised. What? Harvey Pike. When he insulted me, you should have hit him in the mouth. She stared straight ahead. It would have felt good. It would have started a war. Brent, the war is already started. He made that clear. She shifted on the wagon seat. But you were right not to hit him. Violence would have given him exactly what he wanted. She trailed off. Just what? I am tired of people thinking they can say anything to me because I am small and foreign and powerless. Her hands clenched in her lap. In China, my father was respected, an engineer, someone important. Here, I am just a thing people can insult without consequence. You're not a thing. To them I am. She looked at him. But thank you for trying to defend me, even if it would have been stupid. They rode on. When they got back to the ranch, Dutch was waiting with bad news. The black stallion, the one Caleb had been trying to sell for months, had broken out of the corral again and was raising hell in the south pasture. Can't get near him, Dutch said. He's gone completely wild, tried to bite me twice and kicked a hole in the water trough. Caleb swore. The stallion had cost him a fortune 2 years ago, purchased with dreams of breeding a quality herd. But the animal was mean, unpredictable, and had only gotten worse as the drought progressed. He'd tried selling it, but no one wanted a horse with that kind of reputation. I'll shoot him, Caleb said. Put us all out of our misery. Wait. Leon had already climbed down from the wagon. Let me try something first. Try what? That horse is dangerous. I know. I can see that from here. She started toward the pasture. Just wait. Caleb followed, ready to intervene if things went bad. They could see the stallion from 100 yards away, a massive black beast, ears pinned back, eyes rolling white. It had backed into a corner of the fence and was screaming at nothing, hooves churning up dust. Lion stopped at the fence line and just watched for a moment. Not moving, not speaking, just observing. Then she climbed over the fence. Lian, don't... She ignored him. Walked slowly toward the horse, hands visible and empty. The stallion saw her coming and screamed again, rearing up, hooves slashing at the air. Any sane person would have run. Lian kept walking. She started speaking in Chinese, voice low and rhythmic. Not talking to the horse exactly, but creating sound, creating presence. The stallion dropped back to all fours, snorting. Still agitated, but focused now. Focused on her. She stopped about 20 feet away and sat down in the dust. Just sat there. The horse paced, uncertain. This wasn't the reaction it was used to. People either ran or attacked. They didn't just sit. Lian kept talking in that low, rhythmic way. After a few minutes, she lay back completely, staring up at the sky. Vulnerable. Non-threatening. The stallion moved closer. Stopped. Moved closer again. Caleb held his breath. One stomp and she'd be dead. The horse reached her, extended its neck, and sniffed her hair. Lian didn't move, didn't react, just lay there breathing slowly, still talking in Chinese. Then, impossibly, the stallion lowered its head and nudged her shoulder with its nose. Gentle, curious. Lian sat up slowly, reached out one hand and touched the horse's neck. The stallion didn't flinch. She stood gradually, maintaining contact, still talking. Her hand moved from neck to shoulder, shoulder to withers, learning the animal's body. The horse stood there, ears forward now, tension draining away. Lian walked back toward the fence, and the stallion followed her like a puppy. Dutch whispered, "What in the hell's?" Lian led the horse to the gate. Caleb opened it, and she walked the animal through, one hand on its mane, still speaking that low rhythmic Chinese. She took it straight to the barn, into a stall, and only then released her grip. The stallion made a soft nickering sound and lowered its head to drink from the bucket inside. Lian emerged from the stall, latched it, and turned to find both men staring at her. "What?" she said. "How did you—" Caleb couldn't finish the sentence. "My father worked with animals on the canal projects. Horses, oxen, water buffalo. He said animals understand intention more than words. If you approach with calm, they respond with calm." She dusted off her pants. "Also, that horse is not mean. It is frightened and in pain. There is something wrong with its right foreleg. You should examine it." Dutch looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at the horse, now standing quietly in the stall, and felt something shift in his understanding of who this woman was. "I'll check the leg," he said finally. "Good." Lian walked back toward the house. "I need to start on the irrigation trench before it gets too hot." She left them both standing there, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Dutch said, "She's going to be trouble." "Yeah. But maybe the good kind of trouble. Maybe." That evening, Caleb examined the stallion's leg and found exactly what Lian predicted. An old injury, poorly healed, causing constant pain. No wonder the animal was aggressive. He spent 2 hours carefully manipulating the joint, working out scar tissue, wrapping it properly. The stallion tolerated the treatment with surprising patience. When he finished, Lian was in the yard, still digging her irrigation trench. She'd made another 6 feet of progress. Sweat soaked through her shirt, and her hands had to be blistered beyond belief, but she kept working. "It's almost dark," Caleb said. "I know. Almost finished for today." "Lian, do not tell me to rest." She drove the shovel down hard. "This is what I do. This is who I am. If I stop working, I will think too much about Harvey Pike and Martha Hendricks and all the ways this could go wrong, and I will become afraid. So I work instead." Caleb understood that better than he wanted to admit. He grabbed another shovel and joined her. They worked side by side as the sun set, extending the trench another 10 feet before darkness made it impossible to see. By the time they finished, Caleb's hands were bleeding again through the bandages, and Lian looked ready to collapse. Inside, she heated water and made a simple meal of rice and vegetables. They ate in exhausted silence. Then she rewrapped his hands without comment, and they stumbled to bed, both too tired to do anything except fall asleep on top of the blankets. Caleb dreamed of water bursting from stone, of Sarah standing in green fields, of a woman in red facing down a horse that should have killed her. He woke once in the night and saw Lian curled on her side, still fully dressed, hands tucked under her chin. Even in sleep, she looked ready to jump up and start working again. He wondered what kind of life she'd lived that had made her this way. What kind of fears drove her to work until she dropped? What she was really running from? But those were questions for another day. For now, she was here, fighting beside him against an impossible situation. And somehow, that made the impossible feel slightly less impossible. The next 3 days followed a brutal pattern. Work from before dawn until after dark. Leon digging trenches, repairing fences, organizing the barn, doing the work of 3 people. Caleb trying to keep up despite his ruined hands, watching this small woman outwork him in every way that mattered. Dutch stopped offering to help and just started working alongside them, shaking his head at their determination. "You're both insane," he said on the 3rd evening. Watching Leon haul water buckets that should have been too heavy for her to lift. "Probably," Leon agreed, "but insanity is better than surrender." Thursday night, she spent 3 hours sewing. Caleb watched her work by lamplight, needle flashing through fabric, creating something he didn't recognize at first. Then he realized she was repairing all the damaged tack in the barn. Saddles, reins, harnesses, everything he'd let fall into disrepair. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I do. If Harvey Pike comes tomorrow while we are at the tea and things go badly, we may need to leave quickly." She bit off a thread. "Better to be prepared." "You still want to go? To Martha's tea?" "I told you, refusing is the same as accepting I do not belong." She started on another piece of leather. "Besides, I am curious. I want to see what American women are like when they gather to judge someone. It won't be pleasant. I did not come here for pleasant." She looked at him. "I came here to survive. Everything else is just details." Friday morning arrived too quickly. Leon dressed in the crimson silk again, the same dress from the station, cleaned and pressed, defiant in its foreignness. She'd woven her hair into an elaborate braid and added a jade pin that must have been precious, based on how carefully she handled it. "You look," Caleb searched for the word. "Dangerous?" Leon suggested. "I was going to say beautiful." She looked at him sharply, surprised. Then something in her expression softened just slightly. "Thank you. That is kind." "It's true. Still kind." She adjusted the jade pin. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'm going to be." They rode into town together, and this time Caleb noticed something different in how Leon sat beside him. Spine straighter, chin higher, like she was preparing for battle, which he supposed she was. The church hall sat behind the main chapel, a simple wooden building used for social gatherings and committee meetings. When they arrived at 10 minutes before 2, there were already a dozen women inside, arranged in a semicircle around a single empty chair. Martha Hendricks stood at the center, presiding like a queen. The other women were her court: the banker's wife, the doctor's wife, the school teacher, various ranchers' wives, all of them dressed in their finest, all of them watching the door with predatory interest. Leon paused in the doorway, taking it all in. Then she walked forward, head high, and sat in the empty chair. "Mrs. Mercer," Martha said, "how kind of you to join us." "Thank you for the invitation. We've prepared tea and cake. I hope you enjoy." "Do you drink tea in China?" "Yes, we invented it." A few uncomfortable laughs from the assembled women. Martha poured tea into delicate china cups, and another woman served slices of cake. Leon accepted both with a polite nod, then waited to see what would happen next. The attack, when it came, was surgical. "So tell us, dear," said the doctor's wife, a thin woman named Patricia. "How exactly did you come to marry Mr. Mercer?" "Through an agency in San Francisco." "A marriage agency." The banker's wife, Louise, put just enough emphasis on the word to make it sound sordid. "How practical." "It was very practical," Leon agreed. "And you had never met Mr. Mercer before you arrived?" Martha asked. "No." "That must have been quite a shock, seeing the state of things." "The ranch is struggling," Leon said evenly, "but it is not dead. There is a difference." "Is there?" Patricia leaned forward. "Because from what I've heard, Mercer's barely holding on. Why would a young woman bind herself to a failing enterprise? Unless," she let the implication hang, Unless what? Leon's voice stayed level. Unless you had no other options. The room went quiet. This was the heart of it. The real question they all wanted answered. What kind of woman marries a stranger and moves to a dying ranch? Lynn set down her teacup carefully. You are asking if I am desperate. Well, the answer is yes. I was desperate. In San Francisco, I worked 14 hours a day for wages that barely kept me alive. In Sacramento, I was paid even less. I had no family except a younger brother who also struggles. No prospects. No future. She met each woman's eyes in turn. So yes, I was desperate. Desperate enough to take a chance on a stranger in a dying valley. Does that satisfy your curiosity? Martha's eyes glittered. There's no need to be defensive, dear. I am not defensive. I am honest. You asked a question. I answered it. Leon picked up her tea again. Now, I have a question for you. Oh? Why does it matter to you who I am or why I came here? My marriage to Caleb Mercer does not affect your life in any way. Patricia gasped. Of course it affects us. We have standards in this valley. We have a community to protect. Go on me, mate. Protect from what? From me? Leon's voice stayed calm, but something sharp edged underneath. I am one woman. I work hard. I obey the law. I hurt no one. What exactly am I threatening? Martha leaned forward. You're threatening the natural order of things, the way things are supposed to be. Supposed to be according to whom? According to tradition. According to common sense. According to... Martha struggled for words. According to you, Leon finished. According to what makes you comfortable. She stood, setting down the cup and saucer with deliberate care. Thank you for the tea. It was very enlightening. But I will not sit here and be interrogated like a criminal for the crime of existing in a way that makes you uncomfortable. She walked toward the door. Mrs. Mercer, Martha called out, voice cold. If you leave now, you will not be welcome in this community. Leon stopped, turned. I was never welcome. This tea was not an invitation. It was an examination. You wanted to see if I could be shamed, controlled, or broken. I cannot. So I fail your test. She inclined her head slightly. Good afternoon, ladies. She left. Caleb had been waiting outside, sitting on the church steps. He stood when Leon emerged, took one look at her face, and knew exactly how it had gone. That bad? That predictable. She walked past him toward the wagon. We should leave before they decide to throw me out formally. They rode out of town in silence. But this time, when Caleb looked over, he saw Leon was smiling slightly. What? He asked. I told them the truth. All of it. And it felt... She searched for the word. Liberating. They're going to make things harder now. Things were already hard. Now, at least I do not have to pretend otherwise. She looked at him. Do you regret bringing me here? The question caught him off guard. Did he regret it? The judgment? The threats? The way everything had gotten more complicated? But then he thought about the clean house, the repaired tack, the irrigation trench slowly taking shape, the way the ranch no longer felt like a tomb. No, he said. I don't regret it. Leon nodded, satisfied. Good, because I do not regret coming. They rode the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both of them knowing that whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Even if the whole valley wanted to tear them apart. The drought got worse, not gradually, the way natural disasters usually unfold, but with sudden vicious intensity, like the land itself had decided to give up. The week after Leon's disastrous tea with the church ladies, 3 more wells dried up across the valley. The Morrison place, already abandoned, caught fire from dry lightning and burned to the foundation in 40 minutes. Even the cottonwood trees along what used to be Blackstone Creek started dying, their leaves turning brown in August instead of October. Caleb watched it all happening and felt the familiar weight of defeat settling on his shoulders. He'd seen droughts before, survived lean years, but this was different. This felt biblical, like the earth was punishing them for something they couldn't name. But Leon just kept working. She'd finished the irrigation trench and moved on to reinforcing the barn's foundation. Then she started digging test holes around the property. using some method her father had taught her, something about reading the soil layers, understanding where water might still hide underground. There is nothing there, Hossa, Caleb told her after she dug the 5th dry hole in as many days. I've lived on this land for 15 years. I know where the water is. You know where the water was, Leon corrected. She was covered in dirt, sweat plastering her hair to her forehead, hands raw despite the gloves she'd started wearing. But water moves underground, especially during drought. It finds new channels, new paths. We just have to find where it went, or we could accept that it's gone. She looked at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. Is that what you want to do? Accept defeat? I want to be realistic. Realistic is another word for giving up. She climbed out of the hole and started filling her canteen from their dwindling water supply. My father told me about a drought in Sichuan province that lasted 7 years. Everyone said the land was cursed, but engineers found water by studying ancient riverbed patterns, following them underground like maps. She drank, then poured a little water over her head, gasping at the brief relief. This valley had rivers once. I can see the old channels in the landscape. The water did not disappear. It just went deeper. Deeper than we can reach. Maybe, maybe not. She grabbed a surveying rope she'd made from scavenged cord. But I will not know until I try. Dutch wandered over, chewing tobacco, watching Leanne mark out another test site with stakes and string. She don't quit, does she? No, kote, Caleb said. She doesn't. That going to be enough? The question hung between them, because quitting wasn't the only thing that mattered. You could work yourself to death and still lose everything. That night, Caleb found Leanne in the barn, sketching something by lantern light. She'd torn pages from an old ledger and was drawing what looked like a map of the ranch, marking elevations, noting soil types, drawing lines between the test holes. What are you doing? Looking for patterns. She didn't look up, just kept marking points on the paper. See here, all the western holes are dry, but the eastern ones have damp soil at 30 feet. That means water is moving east following the bedrock slope. Caleb studied the map. He'd lived on this land his whole adult life, but he'd never thought to document it this way. Never tried to see the whole picture at once. So if water's moving east, then we dig east. Follow the flow until we find the source. She tapped a spot on the map with her pencil. Here, the North Ridge, where the land rises and the rock formations change. If there is water anywhere, it will be there. Caleb looked at the spot she'd marked and felt his stomach drop. That's solid granite. You saw it yourself when we rode past. Nothing grows there. Nothing lives there. Because the water is underneath, not on top. She finally looked up, and he saw absolute conviction in her expression. Trust me. Leanne, even if you're right, and that's a big if, we don't have the equipment to drill through granite. We don't have the time. We don't have the money. We have pickaxes. We have shovels. We have time until we die. She stood, rolling up the map. And we have nothing to lose. We could waste weeks digging in the wrong place, or we could find water and save the ranch. She moved closer, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she reached out and put one hand on his arm. Small hand, strong grip. You brought me here to help you survive. Let me help. He wanted to say no, wanted to explain that false hope was worse than no hope, that digging for water that didn't exist would break them both. But looking at her face, seeing that determination burning in her eyes, he couldn't do it. Maybe she was right. Maybe they had nothing left to lose. Okay, he said. We dig. She smiled then, a real smile, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less guarded. We start tomorrow, she said. Before sunrise, before the heat. We will need all our strength. They started digging at 4 a.m. Saturday morning, hauling equipment to the North Ridge in darkness. The spot Leanne had chosen was brutal. Rocky soil over granite bedrock, no shade, exposed to the full force of the sun once it rose. Dutch came with them, despite his reservations. If you two are going to kill yourselves being stubborn, someone should be there to bury the bodies. The first day, they made 3 feet of progress. The second day, 2 feet. By the third day, they were smashing through granite with pickaxes, and progress slowed to inches. Caleb's hands, barely healed from the fence work, split open again. Leon developed blisters on top of blisters. Dutch pulled a muscle in his back and spent 2 days unable to stand straight, but they kept digging. Word spread across the valley about what they were doing. People started calling it Mercer's Folly or the Chinaman's Grave. Harvey Pike rode past one afternoon with 3 of his men. Harvey Pike, all of them laughing. "How far down you plan to go, Mercer?" Harvey called out. "All the way to hell?" Caleb ignored him, driving the pickaxe down into stubborn granite. "I'm serious. What's the plan here? You gonna dig until the devil himself tells you there's no water?" "Go away, Harvey. Free country. I can watch a man make a fool of himself if I want." Harvey leaned on his saddle horn. "Though I gotta say I'm impressed. Most men would have given up by now. But you got that little celestial convincing you miracles are real." Leon climbed out of the hole, dust-covered, exhausted. Miracles are not real. Engineering is real. Mathematics is real. Understanding geology is real. "You hear that, boys?" Harvey grinned at his men. "She understands geology, probably learned it in some rice paddy in China. My father built irrigation systems that served 10,000 people." Leon said quietly, "What have you built besides a reputation for being cruel?" Harvey's smile disappeared. "Watch your mouth, girl." "Or what? You will insult me more? You will tell more people I do not belong?" She moved closer to the edge of the pit. "You have already done your worst. I am still here, still digging, still believing there is water under this rock. And when I find it, you will look very foolish. If you find it. When I find it." Harvey stared at her for a long moment, something dangerous moving behind his eyes. Then he spat into the dust. "You know what? I hope you do find water. I hope you dig all the way down to some underground river and it comes bursting out like a fountain. You know why? Why? Because water rights in this valley belong to whoever has the oldest claim. And I got the oldest claim. So if you find water on Mercer's land, I'll just file a downstream access petition and take half of it." He grinned. "See, that's the difference between you and me. You think hard work matters. I know the law matters more." He rode off, leaving them standing there with that truth hanging in the air like smoke. Dutch said, "He's right, you know. Water rights law is complicated. If you strike water, half the valley's going to claim they got access rights. Then we will deal with that when it happens," Leon said. She climbed back into the hole. "Right now, the problem is finding water. Later, the problem is keeping it." They dug for 6 more days. The hole got deeper, the work got harder, and Caleb started wondering if maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was just stubbornness disguised as hope. Maybe Lion's father had been lucky in China, and that luck didn't transfer across oceans. On the 7th day, Caleb's pickaxe broke. The handle shattered on a downswing, sending the metal head spinning into darkness at the bottom of the pit. Caleb stood there holding the splintered wood, breathing hard, and felt something inside him break too. 15 years on this land. 4 years without Sarah. Weeks of impossible work with a woman he barely knew, chasing a dream that everyone said was insane. And for what? For a broken pickaxe and a hole that led to nothing but more rock. "We should stop," he said. Leanne looked up from where she'd been clearing rubble. "What?" "I said we should stop. This is insane. We've been digging for 2 weeks and found nothing. We're destroying ourselves for nothing. We have not reached the right depth yet." "There is no right depth!" His voice cracked, all the frustration and fear finally breaking through. "There's just rock and more rock, and eventually bedrock that goes down forever. We're not going to find water. We're just going to kill ourselves trying." "Mos City." Leanne climbed up beside him, breathing hard, covered in granite dust that made her look like a ghost. "We are close." "You don't know that." "I can feel it. The rock is changing, getting softer, more porous." "That doesn't mean anything." "It means everything." She grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. 2 more days. Give me 2 more days. Leanne, you brought me here because you needed hope, because you could not do this alone." Her grip tightened. Well, now I need you to believe. Just for 2 more days. Can you do that? He wanted to say no. Wanted to climb out of this hole and walk away and let the ranch die like it was always going to die. But looking at her face, filthy, exhausted, absolutely certain, he couldn't do it. 2 days, he said. That's it. She nodded. 2 days. They kept digging. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay on his side of the blanket wall, listening to Leon breathe, and tried to remember why he'd ever thought this was a good idea. Bringing a stranger to a dying ranch, chasing water that didn't exist, fighting a whole valley of people who wanted him to fail. Around 2 a.m., he heard Leon get up. She moved quietly, but he'd learned to recognize her sounds by now. The soft pad of her feet, the way she carefully avoided the floorboards that creaked. He got up and found her on the porch, sitting on the steps, staring out at the darkness. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No." She didn't turn around. Too much thinking. He sat beside her. The night was cooler than it had been in weeks, a hint of autumn finally creeping into the air. Above them, stars burned in vast, indifferent patterns. "What are you thinking about, Gaze?" "My father." Her voice was soft. "He used to say that engineering is just faith with mathematics. You believe something is possible, then you prove it with numbers and work." She paused. "But what if you believe and the mathematics are wrong? What if you work and fail anyway? Then you failed, but at least you tried. Is that enough? Just trying?" Caleb thought about Sarah, about all the times he'd tried to save her during the pregnancy, tried to get the doctor faster, tried to do something, anything, and she'd died anyway. "No," he said honestly. "Sometimes trying isn't enough. Sometimes the world just breaks you no matter what you do." Leon looked at him. "That is very bleak." "It's very true." They sat in silence for a while. Then Leon said, "I lied to you." "About what?" "About why I came here." She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "I told you I needed opportunity, freedom, a chance to own something. That was all true. But it was not the whole truth." Caleb waited. "In Sacramento, I worked for a family. The Hendersons. Good people mostly. But they had a son. 23 years old. She stopped, choosing words carefully. "He thought I should be grateful for their employment. Thought I should show that gratitude in certain ways." Cold understanding settled in Caleb's chest. "Did he?" "No. But he tried. And when I fought back, when I broke his nose with a cleaning pot, the family fired me. Told everyone I was violent, unstable, dangerous." Her voice stayed flat, controlled. "After that, no one would hire me. I could not find work anywhere. So I saw the agency advertisement, and I thought, anywhere is better than here. Even a dying ranch with a stranger." "You were running." "Yes, I was running." She looked at him. "Just like you are running from Sarah's death, from the guilt, from the fear that if you leave this place, you will have to admit she died for nothing." The words hit like a fist. "That's not—" "Yes, it is." She cut him off gently. "We are both running, Caleb. Running from different things, but running. And now we are stuck here together. In this hole we dug, hoping to find water, when really we are just hoping to find a reason to keep breathing." He wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself. But she was right, and they both knew it. "So what do we do?" he asked finally. "We keep digging." She stood, brushing dust from her pants. "Because running or not, we are here now. And giving up means they win. Harvey Pike wins. Martha Hendricks wins. Everyone who said we were doomed wins." She looked down at him. "I'm tired of letting cruel people win." "What if there's no water?" "Then we find something else. We adapt. We survive." She held out her hand. "But we will not know until we reach the bottom of that hole." He took her hand and let her pull him up. They stood there on the porch, hands clasped, two people held together by desperation and stubbornness, and something that might have been trust. 2 days, he said. 2 days, she agreed. The 8th day of digging started the same as the others. Dark, hot, brutal. They took turns in the pit, one person swinging the pickaxe, one person hauling out debris. Dutch managing the rope system they'd rigged to remove larger rocks. Around noon, with the sun directly overhead and the temperature climbing toward 115, Caleb swung the pickaxe and felt something different. The impact sent vibrations up his arms that were wrong somehow, softer, like he'd hit wood instead of stone. He swung again. Same feeling. "Leanne?" She looked down from the edge of the pit. "What?" "Come here." She climbed down the rope ladder. Caleb pointed at the spot where he'd been working. The rock there looked different, darker, more porous. Water damaged, maybe? If you wanted to be optimistic. Leanne knelt, running her hands over the surface. Then she pulled out her knife and scraped at it. The rock came away in chunks instead of requiring the pickaxe. "This is limestone," she said quietly. "Porous limestone. Water can move through this." "Does that mean—" "It means we are close." She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw fear in her eyes, fear of hope. "We need to go deeper, carefully." They worked together, removing the softer limestone inch by inch. Dutch brought down lanterns as the pit grew deeper and the light dimmed. The air got cooler, wetter. Then Caleb's pickaxe punched through into empty space. The sound echoed wrong, hollow. They both froze. Leanne moved forward carefully, feeling the hole he'd created. "There is space behind this, a cavity." "How big?" "I do not know, but there is air movement. I can feel it." She looked at him. "We break through." They widened the hole carefully, removing limestone in chunks, until there was a gap big enough to look through. Caleb held a lantern up to the opening. The light disappeared into darkness, but he could hear something, a faint trickling sound. Water on stone. "There's something down there, he said. Leanne pushed past him, sticking her head into the gap. She stayed there for a long moment, listening. Then she pulled back. "There is water," she said. "I can hear it, smell it, taste it in the air." Her hands were shaking. "We found it." Caleb felt like his heart was going to explode through his chest. "We need to make this hole bigger. See how much water there actually is." They worked with renewed energy, exhaustion forgotten. The hole widened, the sound of water grew louder, and finally, the opening was big enough for a person to fit through. "I'm going in," Leanne said. "No, it could be unstable. It is my father's method. I go first." She was already tying a rope around her waist. "If I fall, you pull me up." "Leanne!" But she'd already climbed through the hole. Caleb held the rope, heart hammering, listening to her move around in the darkness below. Every sound made him imagine her falling, getting trapped, drowning in an underground river. Then her voice echoed up, "Lower me down, slowly." He fed out rope, feeling her weight descend. 20 feet, 30 feet, 40. Then the rope went slack. "Leanne!" Her voice came back faint but clear. "I'm safe. I am standing on solid rock. And Caleb—" She paused. "There is so much water." He didn't remember making the decision. One moment he was at the top, the next he was climbing down the rope into darkness, lantern clutched in his teeth. The cavity opened up around him, a natural chamber carved by water over thousands of years. The lantern light caught on wet stone walls, formations of limestone and calcite, and there, at the bottom, a pool of dark water that spread out into the shadows. Leanne stood at the edge of the pool, her reflection wavering on the surface. When she looked up at him, her face was wet with tears. "It is real," she whispered. "We found it, Chut." Caleb knelt at the water's edge, cupped his hands, and drank. The water was cold, clean, tasting faintly of minerals. The best thing he'd ever tasted in his life. They sat there together in the darkness, beside the pool they'd found, and for the first time in years, Caleb felt something close to joy. Then Dutch's voice echoed down from above. "You two find something or you both fall to your deaths." "We found it," Caleb shouted back. "Dutch, we actually found it." A pause. Then, "You're shitting me. Come see for yourself." Dutch descended slowly, swearing the whole way, and when he reached the bottom and saw the pool, he just stood there shaking his head. "I'll be damned," he said finally. "You crazy sons of bitches actually did it." See, they climbed back up to the surface as the sun was setting, all three of them exhausted, filthy, and grinning like idiots. The first thing Caleb did was collapse on the ground beside the pit. The second thing was start laughing. Leanne sat beside him, still crying a little, laughing too. We did it. You did it, he corrected. This was your idea, your father's knowledge. I just dug where you told me to dig. We did it together, she said firmly. Partners. The word hung between them. Partners. Not mail-order bride and desperate rancher, not stranger and stranger. Partners. Yet this, Caleb said. Partners. They stayed there as darkness fell, too tired to move, too happy to care. Above them, stars appeared one by one, and for the first time in years, the valley didn't feel like it was dying. The next morning, reality hit. They'd found water, yes, but it was 40 feet underground in a limestone cavern. Getting it to the surface, distributing it across the ranch, building a sustainable system that would take weeks of work, materials they didn't have, money they didn't have, and word would spread. Harvey Pike would hear about it. The whole valley would hear about it. And then would come the fights over water rights, property lines, legal access. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, making lists of everything they needed, watching the costs add up to impossible numbers. Leanne made breakfast, then sat across from him. Tell me. We need pipe. Lots of pipe. A pump system, storage tanks, channels to distribute the water. He showed her the numbers. We're looking at $300 minimum. Probably more like $500. I don't have that kind of money. What do you have? Maybe $60 total. That's supposed to last us through winter. Then we build it ourselves, without pipes. You can't move water uphill without pipes. You can with a pulley system and barrels. It will be slower, but it will work. She grabbed his pencil and started sketching. We build a platform here above the cavern. Attach ropes to large barrels, lower them into the pool, fill them, haul them up. Then we move the water to storage tanks using gravity and channels. Caleb studied her drawing. That would work for small amounts, but we need hundreds of gallons a day. So we build multiple systems, work in shifts. She kept sketching, adding details. It will be hard, very hard, but it is possible. Leanne, we're already exhausted. We can barely stand, and you want to add hauling water 40 feet up from an underground cavern? Yes. That's insane. Yes. She looked at him. But we have done many insane things. What is one more? He wanted to argue. But looking at her face, still bruised from their weeks of brutal labor, still determined despite everything, he couldn't do it. Okay, he said. We try. They spent the next week building the water hauling system. Dutch helped, but his back was still bad, so most of the heavy work fell to Caleb and Leanne. They salvaged wood from abandoned homesteads, bought rope with their dwindling savings, and found old barrels behind the general store that Tom Chen sold them for cost. The platform they built was ugly and probably unsafe, but it worked. The first time they successfully hauled a full barrel up from the cavern, Leanne actually cheered, a sound Caleb had never heard from her before. They filled the ranch's storage tanks within 3 days. The cattle drank clean water for the first time in months. The irrigation channels Leanne had dug earlier carried water to the fields. And slowly, impossibly, green began appearing in the soil. Grass shoots, tiny, fragile, but real. Caleb stood in the field one evening, watching grass grow in dirt that had been dead for years, and felt tears running down his face without knowing when they'd started. Leanne found him there. Didn't say anything, just stood beside him, watching green emerge from brown. Sarah would have loved this, he said finally. Tell me more about her. So he did. Told Leanne about how Sarah used to sing while she worked, how she collected wildflowers in glass jars, how she'd believed the ranch could be something beautiful. Told her about the baby they'd lost. A boy, the doctor had said afterward, and how Sarah had bled out before the doctor could do anything. Leanne listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said she would be proud of you for not giving up. I almost did give up, 100 times. But you did not. You brought me here instead, and together we found water. She paused. That is not giving up. That is fighting in a different way. News of the water spread within days. Riders from neighboring ranches started appearing, asking questions, making offers. Some wanted to buy water rights. Others wanted to lease access to the spring. Harvey Pike showed up with a lawyer, claiming historical access based on some old territorial law. Caleb told them all the same thing. Water's not for sale, not yet. We need to figure out what we have first. But he knew it was only a matter of time before the fight started for real. One evening, Tom Chen rode out from town looking worried. There's talk, he said. Bad talk. Some of Harvey's men saying they're going to ride out here at night. Break your equipment. Maybe worse. Let them try, Leanne said. She'd been repairing fence and was holding a hammer like a weapon. They will find us ready. Mrs. Mercer, these men are dangerous. They've already beaten 2 Chinese workers in the valley in the past year, put one in the hospital. I know they are dangerous. That is why we do not back down. She set the hammer aside. Thank you for the warning. We will be careful. Tom looked at Caleb. She's braver than both of us. Yeah, Caleb said. She is. Huh. That night, they took turns keeping watch. Caleb sat on the porch with his rifle while Leanne slept. Then she took over while he rested. Around 3 a.m. during Leanne's watch, she heard horses approaching. She woke Caleb without making noise. They moved to different positions, him by the barn, her by the water platform, and waited. 4 riders appeared in the moonlight. They stopped at the edge of the property, talking in low voices, clearly planning something. Caleb recognized one of them, Billy Sutton, Harvey's idiot nephew. They dismounted and started walking toward the platform, carrying something. Caleb couldn't see what until they got closer. Crowbars and axes. They were going to destroy the water system. Caleb stepped out of the shadows, rifle raised. That's far enough. The men froze. Billy turned, trying to see into the darkness. Who's there? You know who. This is my land, and you're trespassing. We were just riding through. With axes? At 3 in the morning? Caleb chambered around, the sound loud in the quiet night. Try again. Look, Mercer, we don't want trouble. Then leave. One of the other men spoke up. Harvey says that water belongs to the whole valley. Says you got no right keeping it for yourself. Harvey can come tell me that himself. In daylight. Unarmed. Caleb moved closer, rifle still raised. Until then, get off my property, Shab. They started backing toward their horses. But Billy couldn't help himself. You're making a mistake, Mercer. Harvey's going to make you pay for this. You and your Chinese whore both. The shot came from behind Caleb. A single rifle crack that sent dirt exploding at Billy's feet. Everyone turned. Leanne stood near the house, Sarah's old hunting rifle in her hands, already reloading. The next one will not miss, she said calmly. Leave now. The men practically ran to their horses. They were gone within seconds, hoofbeats fading into the night. Caleb lowered his rifle, hands shaking with adrenaline. You could have hit him. I hit exactly where I aimed. She lowered her rifle too. My father taught me to shoot, for protecting the work sites from bandits. Your father taught you a lot of things. Yes, he believed daughters should know everything sons know. She looked at him. Was I wrong to shoot? BCPs. No, you probably saved us both. He walked over to her. But now Harvey's going to be even more angry. Good. Angry men make mistakes. She started toward the house. We should sleep while we can. They will not come back tonight. But Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay on his side of the blanket wall thinking about everything that could still go wrong. Harvey Pike wasn't going to give up. The valley wasn't going to accept this. Sooner or later, this would end in violence. And for the first time, he realized he was more afraid of losing Leanne than losing the ranch. When had that happened? When had this stubborn Chinese woman become more important than the land he'd bled for? He didn't have an answer, just knew it was true. In the darkness, Leanne's voice came soft. Caleb, are you awake? Yeah. I'm sorry for bringing more trouble. You didn't bring trouble. Trouble was already here. You just gave me a reason to fight it instead of surrendering. A long silence. Then, I'm glad I came here, even with everything bad. I am glad. Me too, he said, and meant it more than anything he'd ever said. The grass kept growing. Within 3 weeks, The dead fields around Caleb's ranch had transformed into something that looked almost like the valley used to be. Not lush exactly, not the belly-high prairie grass from before the drought, but green. Actual, undeniable green spreading outward from the irrigation channels Leon had designed. Other ranchers started riding past just to stare, some with envy, some with calculation, a few with something that looked like hope. Dutch stood in the field one morning, shaking his head. 20 years I've been working ranches in this valley. Never seen land come back this fast. It is not magic, Leon said, adjusting the water flow through one of the channels. It is just water in the right place at the right time. Still looks like magic to me. By early October, they'd replenished the herd to 23 cattle, bought cheap from desperate ranchers who couldn't feed their animals anymore. The black stallion had become gentle under Leon's care, his injured leg healing properly for the first time. Even the barn had stopped leaning, reinforced with the lumber they'd salvaged and repaired. Caleb walked through it all feeling like he'd stumbled into someone else's life. A better life. One where things actually worked. But the better things got on the ranch, the worse things got in town. Harvey Pike had filed 3 separate legal challenges claiming access rights to the water. The county clerk, who was Harvey's cousin, kept losing the paperwork whenever Caleb tried to file counterclaims. And the whispers had started. Ugly rumors about what Caleb and Leanne were really doing out there on the ranch, what kind of unnatural arrangement they had. Martha Hendricks led a petition to have the marriage investigated for moral irregularities. 23 families signed it. They cannot do that, Leon said when Tom Chen brought them a copy of the petition. We are legally married. Legally married is one thing, Tom replied. Accepted is another. And Martha's arguing that the marriage was fraudulent from the start, that you were brought here under false pretenses for improper purposes. What improper purposes? Caleb demanded. Tom looked uncomfortable. They're saying you needed a worker, not a wife. That the marriage is just a business arrangement to get around labor laws. That's insane. That's Blackstone Valley. Tom set the petition on the table. Look, I'm just warning you. The hearing is set for November 15th, county courthouse. If the judge rules against you, he can annul the marriage and potentially charge you both with fraud. After Tom left, Caleb and Leon sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Leon said, "We should make the marriage real." Caleb's head snapped up. What? You heard me. We should make it real, in all ways. She wasn't looking at him, just staring at her hands. If we are truly married, living as husband and wife, they cannot claim fraud. Leon, you said you weren't ready for that. I said I was not ready then. That was 2 months ago. Before we found the water, before we became partners. She finally looked at him. I trust you now. That changes things. Caleb felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. We can't just do this because of a legal hearing. Why not? We did everything else because of necessity. We married because we were desperate. We dug for water because we had no choice. We fought Harvey Pike because he left us no option. But boss and much. She stood, pacing. This is just one more necessary thing. No. Caleb stood too. No, it's not the same. This is different. How? Because it's personal. Because it matters. He struggled to find words. Because I don't want our first time together to be some calculated move to satisfy a judge. Leon stopped pacing. Then what do you want it to be? The question hung between them. Caleb thought about Sarah, about how they'd courted properly, married in a church, done everything the right way, and she'd still died. All that propriety hadn't saved her. But this strange arrangement with Leon had saved him, saved the ranch, saved everything that mattered. I want it to be real, he said finally. Not strategic, not calculated, real. So, and how do we make it real? He crossed the room and took her hand. We start by being honest. No more pretending this is just business. No more sleeping with a wall of blankets between us like strangers. Her hand tightened in his. I am afraid. Of what? Of wanting this. Of caring too much. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. In San Francisco, I learned not to want things. Not to care. Because wanting and caring just made it hurt more when things were taken away. And if I let myself want this, want you, and it gets taken away. But I can't promise it won't be taken away, Caleb said honestly. The hearing might go badly. Harvey might find a way to destroy us. The drought might come back. 100 things could go wrong. He pulled her closer. But I'm tired of living like I'm already defeated. Sarah died, and I spent 4 years acting like I died with her. Then you showed up and reminded me that being alive means fighting for things, even when you might lose. Lien looked up at him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. I do not know how to do this. Be a real wife. I have never... Neither have I. Not like this. He touched her face gently. We'll figure it out. Same way we figured out everything else. Together. She kissed him then. Sudden, fierce, tasting like desperation and hope mixed together. Caleb kissed her back, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was actually present in his own life instead of watching it happen from a distance. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lien said, "The blanket wall comes down tonight." "Yeah," Caleb agreed. "It does." That evening, they removed the blankets that had separated their sides of the bed for 2 months, folded them carefully and put them in the chest at the foot of the bed like they were putting away an old version of themselves. What happened after that was awkward and nervous, and nothing like Caleb remembered intimacy being with Sarah. Lien was shy in ways that surprised him, and he was out of practice in ways that embarrassed him. They fumbled and apologized and laughed at the wrongness of it all. But it was real, honest. Two people choosing each other instead of just surviving next to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Caleb felt something in his chest crack open, some locked place he'd kept sealed since Sarah died. "Are you crying, sweet?" Lien asked softly. "Maybe." He wiped his eyes. "I didn't think I could feel this again. Didn't think I deserved to." "You deserve good things, Caleb Mercer." She pressed closer. "You are a good man, stubborn and damaged and sometimes stupid, but good." "You're not so bad yourself. Stubborn and terrifying and definitely smarter than me, but not bad." She laughed quietly. "We are quite a pair." "Yeah, we are." They fell asleep like that, no wall between them, and for the first time since Lien had arrived, Caleb slept through the entire night without nightmares. The next morning, everything felt different. Small things. The way Lien smiled at him over breakfast, the way she leaned against his shoulder while they worked on the water system, the casual touches that hadn't existed before. They were still partners, still fighters, but now there was something else underneath it all. Something that felt dangerously close to love, Dutch noticed immediately. "About damn time was all Scotian," was all he said, but he was grinning. The change didn't go unnoticed in town either. When Caleb and Lien went to Bridgeport for supplies a week later, there was something different in how people looked at them. Less mockery, more unease. Like they'd expected the arrangement to collapse by now, and the fact that it hadn't upset some fundamental assumption about how the world worked. Tom Chen pulled Caleb aside while Lien was examining seed packets. "People are talking. People are always talking." "No, I mean really talking, saying you two look happy." Tom glanced toward where Lien stood. "That's making them nervous. They could handle it when it looked like a business arrangement. But now it looks real, and that's threatening something they can't quite name. Let them be threatened. Caleb, I'm serious. Martha Hendricks is pushing the hearing date up, says there's urgency now, and Harvey's been meeting with some territorial representatives, trying to build a case for taking the water rights entirely. On what grounds? Claiming you violated homestead requirements, that you abandoned the property during the drought, so your claim is forfeit. That's bullshit. I never left. Masum Gate. Can you prove it? Got witnesses willing to testify you were here the whole time? Tom shook his head. Harvey's got 3 men ready to swear they rode past your ranch multiple times last spring and never saw anyone. They're lying. Doesn't matter if you can't prove it. Tom looked worried. You need a lawyer, a real one, not the drunk they've got here in Bridgeport. I can't afford a lawyer. Then you need to be very careful at that hearing, because if things go wrong... He didn't finish the sentence, didn't have to. Caleb found Lien and told her what Tom had said. She listened without expression, then calmly selected the seeds she wanted and paid for them. On the ride home, she finally spoke. We should prepare for the worst. What do you mean? I mean, should have a plan. If the hearing goes badly, if they annul the marriage or take the water rights or both. She stared at the road ahead. Where would we go? Caleb hadn't let himself think that far. I don't know. Sacramento, maybe, or further. Oregon. Somewhere no one knows us. And we would start over, build something new, if we had to. Yeah. She nodded slowly. Okay, then we prepare for that possibility. Save money. Pack essential things. Make sure we can leave quickly if necessary. You do that? Leave everything we've built? I would leave anything to stay with you. She said it simply, like stating a fact. The ranch matters, the water matters, but you matter more. Caleb felt his throat tighten. When did that happen? I do not know exactly. Somewhere between the first hole we dug and the last time you told me I was being stubborn. She looked at him. When did it happen for you? The day you faced down that stallion, when you sat in the dust and refused to be afraid. He paused. I looked at you and thought, this woman is either insane or the bravest person I've ever met. And then I realized I didn't care which one was true. Maybe I am both. Probably. They rode on, and despite everything threatening them, Caleb felt oddly peaceful. Whatever happened, they'd face it together. That had to count for something. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. On October 23rd, a rider came to the ranch just after dawn. Not Harvey or one of his men, but a stranger, well-dressed, carrying official-looking papers. Caleb Mercer? The man asked. That's me. I'm serving you notice of an emergency hearing regarding water rights and property claims. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., county courthouse. He handed over the papers. You're required to appear with all documentation proving legal ownership and water access rights. Tomorrow. That's less than 24 hours' notice. Those are my instructions. The man tipped his hat and rode off before Caleb could protest further. Lynn read the papers over his shoulder. This is wrong. They're not following proper procedures. Harvey's probably paying someone to rush this through before we can prepare properly. Caleb felt cold settling in his stomach. We need those documents. The original homestead claim, the marriage license, everything. Wow. They spent the rest of the day gathering papers, organizing their case, trying to build a defense with no legal training and no time. Dutch rode into town to see if Tom knew anything, came back with bad news. The judge is Harrison Wells, Harvey's hunting buddy. They're drinking partners. Dutch looked grim. This hearing is a setup. They're going to rule against you no matter what you say. Then what do we do? Leon asked. Pack, Dutch said bluntly. Pack everything essential and be ready to run. Because if this goes bad tomorrow, Harvey's going to come for this ranch with the law behind him. That night, Caleb and Leon worked in tense silence, packing bags with clothes, documents, money, everything they'd need if they had to disappear. The ranch they'd fought so hard to save now felt like a prison they might have to escape. Around midnight, Leon stopped packing and sat on the bed. I am tired of running. Yes. I know. In China, I ran from poverty. In San Francisco, I ran from abuse. In Sacramento, I ran from unemployment. And now we are preparing to run again. She looked at him. When does it stop? I don't know. I want it to stop. I want to stand and fight and win. Her hands clenched into fists. I am tired of letting cruel people take everything. Caleb sat beside her. Sometimes fighting means losing everything. Then we lose everything. But at least we lose it fighting, not running. She turned to face him fully. Promise me, tomorrow at the hearing, we do not back down. We do not apologize. We do not give them the satisfaction of seeing us broken. Leon, promise me. He looked at her fierce expression and felt something shift inside him. She was right. Running hadn't saved Sarah. Running wouldn't save the ranch. The only thing running did was delay the inevitable while destroying your spirit in the process. Okay, he said, we fight. No matter what. No matter what. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, and they made love like it might be the last time. Afterward, they held each other in the darkness, listening to the wind scrape across the roof, and neither of them slept at all. The courthouse in Bridgeport was packed when they arrived the next morning. Harvey Pike sat in the front row with his lawyer, looking confident. Martha Hendricks and her church committee occupied another section. Random townspeople filled the rest of the seats, here for the entertainment. Judge Harrison Wells sat behind the bench, already looking bored. He was 70 if he was a day, with a face like old leather and eyes that suggested he'd made up his mind before anyone said a word. "This hearing will come to order," Wells announced, banging his gavel once. "We're here to address multiple claims regarding the Mercer property. Mr. Pike, your lawyer may proceed." Harvey's lawyer, a slick man from the territorial capital, stood and laid out the case. Caleb had abandoned his homestead during the drought, voiding his claim. The marriage to Leanne was fraudulent, designed to import cheap labor under false pretenses. The water discovery was on disputed land that Harvey's family had historical rights to. Therefore, both the property and water rights should be transferred to Harvey Pike. It was all lies, but the lawyer presented it smoothly, with documents and testimony from Harvey's men swearing they'd seen the ranch abandoned. When he finished, Judge Wells looked at Caleb. "Your response?" Caleb stood, papers shaking in his hands. "Your Honor, I never abandoned my property. I've been working that land for 15 years. Can you prove continuous occupation during the drought period? I have my word, and my ranch foreman, Dutch, can testify. Your employee isn't an impartial witness." Wells shuffled some papers. "What about the marriage? What evidence do you have that this was a legitimate union and not a labor arrangement?" Caleb pulled out the marriage license. "We were legally married by the county clerk, who is not present to testify to the circumstances." Wells looked at Leanne. "Mrs. Mercer, did you enter this marriage freely, or were you coerced by economic desperation?" It was a trap question. Answer yes, and the marriage looks coerced. Answer no, and you're calling yourself a liar. Leanne stood. "I entered this marriage because I had no other options. That is true. But desperation does not mean coercion. I chose this path. I chose Caleb Mercer. And I choose to stay with him now, not because I have to, but because I want to." "That's a pretty speech," Wells said, "but it doesn't answer the legal question of whether this marriage meets the standard for—" "I am carrying his child," Leanne said. The courtroom went dead silent. Caleb's head snapped toward her. She hadn't told him, hadn't said anything, but looking at her face now, he saw she was telling the truth. Wells blinked. "You're, pregnant?" "Yes, 6 weeks, I believe, maybe 7. She placed one hand on her stomach and on. "So whatever you think about the legitimacy of our marriage, it is real enough for this." Harvey shot to his feet. "That doesn't prove anything. She could be lying. She could be—" "Careful, Mr. Pike," Wells said quietly. "You're coming very close to slandering a woman in my courtroom." Martha Hendricks stood. "Your Honor, even if she is pregnant, which seems awfully convenient timing, it doesn't change the fundamental question of whether—" "It changes everything," Leanne interrupted. "You want to know if this marriage is real, if we are truly husband and wife? I'm carrying proof of that reality. In 6 months, there will be another Mercer in Blackstone Valley, a child who belongs here as much as anyone else's child belongs here." She looked directly at Martha. "More than that, actually. Because this child will be born from 2 people who fought for every single thing they have, who built something from nothing, who refused to quit when everyone told them to. That child will be a half-breed," someone in the audience muttered. Leanne spun toward the voice. "Yes, half Chinese, half American, and completely human, completely deserving of a home, completely deserving of the land their parents broke themselves to save." Her voice rose. "And if that bothers you, if the thought of my child existing in your valley is so offensive, then you are the problem, not us." The courtroom erupted, people shouting, Harvey's lawyer objecting, Martha Hendricks calling for order. Judge Wells banged his gavel repeatedly. "Silence! Silence in my courtroom!" The noise gradually died down. Wells looked at the papers in front of him, then at Caleb and Leanne, then at Harvey. "This is more complicated than I expected." "It's not complicated at all," Harvey said. "Mr. Pike, sit down and be quiet." Wells actually sounded annoyed now. "I've heard enough." He paused, clearly thinking. "Here's my ruling. The marriage stands. pregnant or not. There's no clear evidence of fraud, and I'm not in the business of annulling legal marriages because some people find them distasteful. Caleb felt relief flood through him. However, Wells continued, the water rights issue is more complex. Mr. Mercer, the water you discovered is on your property, correct? Yes, sir. And you've been using it exclusively for your ranch? Yes, but I haven't denied anyone who asked for... That's not what I asked. Wells consulted his papers again. Under territorial law, water rights are shared resources. You can't claim exclusive access to an underground spring just because you found it. Other property owners with historical claims to water in this area have rights too. Your Honor, Caleb started, but Wells held up a hand. I'm ruling that the water remains on your property and you maintain primary access as the discoverer and property owner. However, you must allow reasonable secondary access to neighboring properties at fair market rates. He looked at Harvey. That means no exclusive control, Mr. Pike. Mr. Mercer gets to decide terms of access, not you. Harvey looked furious. That's my ruling. You don't like it, appeal to the territorial court. Wells banged his gavel. This hearing is concluded. People started filing out, some looking satisfied, others angry. Caleb stood there trying to process what had just happened. They'd won, sort of. The marriage stood, they kept the property, they kept primary water rights. But they'd have to share, and that meant Harvey would find ways to make their lives difficult. Still, it was better than losing everything. Leanne grabbed his hand. Let's go home. They pushed through the crowd toward the door. Martha Hendricks blocked their path, face pinched with disapproval. You should be ashamed, she said to Leanne, using a pregnancy to manipulate a legal proceeding. I'm not ashamed of anything, Leanne replied. I told the truth. That is more than you can say. That child will never be accepted here. You know that, don't you? Then we will love that child enough to make up for your hatred. Leanne moved past her. Excuse us. Outside, Tom Chen was waiting by their wagon. He shook his head. I've never seen anything like that. Me neither, Caleb admitted. Are you really pregnant? Tom asked Leanne. Yes, I realized last week I was going to tell Caleb tonight, but... She shrugged. The timing seemed right to share it publicly. Tom laughed. Well, you certainly made an impact. The entire town's going to be talking about this for months. Let them talk, Leon said. We have work to do. The ride home was quiet. Caleb kept glancing at Lion, trying to process the fact that she was carrying his child. A baby. Another chance at the family he'd lost with Sarah. Finally, he said, Were you really going to tell me tonight? Yes. I wanted to wait until after the hearing so it would not distract you. It's a pretty big thing to keep secret. I know. I am sorry. She looked at him. Are you angry? No, He searched for the word. Terrified, excited, overwhelmed, all of it at once. Me too. Her hand moved to her stomach again. I keep thinking about my mother. She had 3 children. I only remember her pregnant with my youngest brother. She was so strong, so capable, even while carrying him. She paused. I hope I can be like that. You're already the strongest person I know. Not strong enough to do this alone. You're not alone. You've got me, Dutch, even Tom, apparently. He took her hand. We'll figure this out. Same way we figured out everything else. Together? Together. When they got back to the ranch, Dutch was waiting with a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving. Heard you won, mostly. Mostly, Caleb agreed. Also heard there's going to be a baby Mercer. Dutch grinned. About damn time this place had some life in it again. They sat on the porch that evening, watching the sun set over fields that were actually green again. Leanne leaned against Caleb's shoulder, one hand on her stomach, and he wrapped his arm around her. What do you think it'll be? Dutch asked. Boy or girl? Healthy, Leanne said. That is all that matters. Healthy and stubborn as hell, Caleb added. With parents like us, it won't have a choice. They sat there as darkness fell, and for the first time since Sarah died, Caleb let himself imagine a future that included joy instead of just survival. A child laughing in these fields, Lion teaching them her father's engineering tricks. The ranch thriving instead of dying. It wouldn't be easy. Harvey would keep causing problems. The valley would keep judging them. The drought might return. 100 things could still go wrong. But they had water. They had each other. And now they had a future taking shape in ways Caleb never dared hope for. "Thank you," he said quietly to Lien. "For what?" "For showing up, for staying, for believing we could find water when everyone said it was impossible." He pulled her closer. "For giving me a reason to keep fighting." "You gave me the same thing," she replied. "A place to belong, a person to fight beside, a future worth building." She tilted her head up and kissed him softly. "We saved each other." "Yeah," he said. "I guess we did." And sitting there on the porch of a ranch that had almost died, with a wife who'd traveled across an ocean to find him and a child growing between them, Caleb Mercer finally understood what Sarah had meant all those years ago when she said the valley felt like freedom. It wasn't the land itself. It was what you built on it, who you built it with, the choice to keep fighting even when everything said to quit. That was freedom. And he'd found it again in the most unexpected way possible, with a woman in red who refused to accept that impossible meant impossible. Winter came to Blackstone Valley like a whisper instead of a scream. The first snow fell in mid-November, light flakes that melted before they hit the ground. Nothing like the brutal winters Caleb remembered from years past, but enough to signal the season was changing, and for the first time in years, the ranch felt ready for it. The barns were repaired. The cattle were healthy and fed. The water system Lion had designed kept flowing even as temperatures dropped, the underground spring apparently immune to the surface cold. They'd stockpiled enough hay to last through March, and the storage sheds were actually full instead of echoing with emptiness. But the real change was harder to measure. It lived in the way Caleb woke up each morning without that crushing weight of dread. In how Lien hummed while she worked, one hand occasionally drifting to her stomach where their child was growing. And how Dutch had stopped making jokes about abandoning ship and started talking about next year's planting season. The ranch had come back to life, and so had everyone on it. Harvey Pike, of course, couldn't let it stand. The first attack came 3 days after the hearing. Someone cut the rope on their main water hauling system, sending a full barrel crashing into the cavern. They lost the barrel and nearly lost Dutch, who was working the platform at the time. The second attack was more subtle. Caleb rode into town to buy supplies and found that suddenly no one would extend him credit anymore. Cash only, even though he'd been buying on credit from these same stores for a decade. "Harvey's been talking to people," Tom Chen explained quietly, "suggesting that your operation is unstable, that you won't be able to pay debts. Some of the merchants are afraid of crossing him." "But you're still selling to me." Tom smiled slightly. "I'm Chinese. I already crossed every line they care about just by existing here. Might as well actually stand for something." The third attack came in the form of 2 families showing up at the ranch demanding water access under the judge's ruling. Caleb recognized them as Harvey's cousins. They didn't actually need water, their wells were fine, but the law said he had to allow access at fair market rates. So they came every day, at inconvenient times, making demands, complaining about water quality, finding excuses to linger and observe, clearly reporting everything back to Harvey. "They're spies," Lien said, watching them fill their barrels with deliberate slowness. "Can't prove it. Do not need to prove it, just need to make it annoying for them." She walked over to where Harvey's cousins were working and started giving them detailed instructions on proper water handling procedures. In Chinese, speaking very slowly and clearly, like they should understand every word. "We don't speak Chinese," one of them protested. "Oh, I am sorry. I forget sometimes that education is not universal." Lien smiled sweetly. "Let me start again, more slowly this time." She proceeded to explain water handling in elaborate detail, switching between English and Chinese randomly until the men grabbed their barrels and left early just to escape. Caleb watched the whole thing from the porch, trying not to laugh. "You're enjoying this." "Very much." She came back and sat beside him. "They will tell Harvey I am difficult. He will get angry. Angry people make mistakes, or they get dangerous. They are already dangerous. Might as well make them stupid too." November stretched into December, and Lion's pregnancy became visible. Not obviously so, not yet, but enough that her dresses needed letting out, and certain movements made her wince. She refused to slow down, though, still working dawn to dusk despite Caleb's protests. "The baby is fine," she insisted. "Chinese women work through pregnancy. My mother worked in the fields until the day before I was born." "Your mother didn't have a husband who could do the heavy lifting. My mother's husband was working a different field." Leanne lifted another sack of feed. "Besides, I am not fragile. The baby needs a mother who is strong, not a mother who sits around getting soft. There's a difference between strong and stubborn." "No, there's not. Strong is just stubborn that succeeded." She had a point, even if Caleb didn't want to admit it. The real test came 2 days before Christmas. Caleb was working on reinforcing the barn's north wall when he heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. He looked up and saw Harvey Pike riding toward the ranch with 8 men, all of them armed. Caleb grabbed his rifle and stepped out to meet them. Leon emerged from the house, also armed, taking position by the porch. Dutch appeared from the bunkhouse, shotgun in hand. Harvey stopped his horse about 20 feet from Caleb. "We need to talk, Mercer." "So talk. Not out here, inside, civilized." Harvey dismounted, and his men followed suit. "Unless you're afraid of a conversation." It was a trap of some kind, but refusing would make Caleb look weak. "Fine. Inside. You and me. Your men stay out here." "Agreed." Harvey turned to his crew. "Wait here. Don't start anything." Caleb led Harvey into the house, very aware of the rifle in his hands and the knife on Harvey's belt. Leanne followed, despite Caleb's look that clearly said, "Stay outside." Harvey sat at the kitchen table without being invited, looking around the clean, organized space with something like surprise. "You fixed the place up." "We've been busy." "I can see that." Harvey pulled out a flask, took a drink, offered it to Caleb. Caleb shook his head. Harvey shrugged and took another pull. "Look, Mercer, I'm going to be straight with you because I'm tired of this dance." "What dance?" "This whole thing. The water, the ranch, your little Chinese bride and her miracle engineering." Harvey set the flask down. "You won, all right? You beat the drought. You beat the odds. You even beat me in court, more or less. Congratulations." Caleb waited. There was more coming. But here's the thing," Harvey continued. "This valley can't function with you two sitting on the only reliable water source, deciding who gets access and who doesn't. It's not sustainable. Sooner or later, we need a real solution. We're already giving access to anyone who asks. At your prices, on your terms, under your control." Harvey leaned forward. "I'm proposing something different. A collective water system. We pool resources, build proper infrastructure, distribute water fairly across the whole valley. Professional operation, not some jerry-rigged barrel system. And who runs this collective system? A board, representatives from the major ranches, including you, if you want a seat." Leanne made a quiet sound that might have been a laugh. Harvey glanced at her, then back to Caleb. "What's funny?" Harvey asked. "You are," Leanne said. "You come here with 8 armed men. You make threats disguised as conversation. And you expect us to believe you want cooperation. I'm offering a fair deal. You are offering control. Control of our water under the disguise of sharing." She moved closer to the table. "What happens when this board votes to limit our access? What happens when you and your friends decide we are using too much water for ourselves? There would be rules, regulations, written by you, enforced by you." Leanne shook her head. "No. We keep our water. You want access. You follow our rules." That was the judge's decision. Harvey's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, both of you. This valley doesn't forget, doesn't forgive. Then the valley can stay thirsty," Caleb said. "We're not handing over control of something we nearly died to find." Harvey stood slowly. "I tried to do this the civilized way. Tried to offer you a path where we all benefit. But you're too stubborn, too stupid, or maybe just too convinced that you're special because you got lucky digging a hole." "We should leave," Lion said quietly to Caleb. "Not afraid, just alert." "Yeah." Caleb kept his rifle pointed at Harvey. "This conversation is over. Get out." Harvey walked to the door, then stopped. You know what the real problem is, Mercer? You think you belong here. You think because you worked hard and suffered, you've earned your place. He looked at Leon. And you? You think that being useful makes you acceptable. That if you just work hard enough, contribute enough, eventually people will forget you're Chinese. I do not care if they forget, Leon said. I only care that they leave us alone. Well, that's never going to happen. Harvey opened the door. This valley was built by certain people for certain people. And you're not the right kind of people. Either of you. Your kid definitely won't be. He smiled coldly. You can win all the court cases you want, can find all the water in the world, but you'll never be one of us, and we'll never stop trying to push you out. He left, his men following. They mounted up and rode away, leaving Caleb and Leon standing in the doorway. He is right, you know, Leon said quietly. About what? About never being accepted. About them never stopping. She watched the riders disappear. This will not end. Not really. There will always be another Harvey, another Martha, another fight. So what do we do? She looked at him. We stop caring about acceptance. Stop trying to prove we belong. We just exist. Build our life, raise our child. Let them waste their energy hating us while we spend our energy on things that actually matter. That simple? That complicated? She touched her stomach. But what choice do we have? Christmas came quietly. No church services for them. Martha Hendricks had made it clear they weren't welcome. No town celebrations. Just the three of them on the ranch, plus Tom Chen, who rode out with gifts and news. Harvey's been drinking a lot, Tom reported, talking big about teaching you a lesson. Most people think it's just talk, but he shrugged. Thought you should know. They spent Christmas Day working because work was what kept them sane. Caleb repaired fence lines. Leon organized the storage shed. Dutch cooked a surprisingly good dinner from their supplies. They exchanged small gifts. Caleb had carved Leon a small wooden box. She'd sewn him a new shirt from fabric she'd bought with her own money. Dutch gave them both whiskey. It was nothing like the Christmases Caleb remembered with Sarah, but it was good in its own way, honest, real. That night, lying in bed, Leanne said, "Tell me about Sarah's Christmases." Caleb had been avoiding talking about Sarah directly, afraid it would hurt Leanne somehow. But she'd asked, so he told her. About the decorations Sarah would make from pine branches and ribbon, the special meals she'd cook, how she'd sing carols even though she couldn't carry a tune. "She sounds wonderful," Leanne said when he finished. She was. "Do you wish she was here instead of me?" The question landed like a stone in dark water. Caleb thought about it carefully, because Leanne deserved honesty. "No," he said finally. "I loved Sarah. Part of me will always love her. But she's gone, and wishing she was here instead of you would be wishing away everything we've built together, everything we've survived." He pulled Leanne closer. "You're not Sarah's replacement. You're your own person, and I love you for who you are, not for who you're not." "Why, yeah, I love you too," she said quietly, "even though I did not plan to, even though it is terrifying. I love you." They fell asleep holding each other, and Caleb dreamed of children playing in green fields, and Sarah smiling from somewhere far away, and everything feeling like it might actually be okay. January brought the real cold. Temperatures dropped below freezing and stayed there for weeks. The water hauling got harder, ice forming on the ropes and platforms, but the underground spring kept flowing, proving Leon's theory that water deep enough was immune to surface weather. Other ranchers started coming around more often. Not Harvey's people, but the smaller operations, families who were genuinely struggling. Caleb started letting them take water for free, despite the judge's ruling about fair market rates. "We cannot afford to give it away," Leon protested after the third family left without paying. "They're desperate. I remember desperate. Being kind to them will not make Harvey stop hating us." "I'm not doing it for Harvey. I'm doing it because it's right." He looked at her. "Besides, you're the one who said water kept for yourself becomes poison." She smiled slightly. "I did say that. When did you start listening to me?" "Probably around the time you shot at Billy Sutton's feet." The families they helped started spreading word. Caleb Mercer was tough but fair. His Chinese wife was strange but brilliant. If you needed water and couldn't pay, they'd work something out. Barter, future credit, labor exchange, anything but letting people die of thirst. It didn't make them popular with Harvey's crowd, but it built something else. Quiet support, people who wouldn't speak up publicly but would help in small ways. Tom Chen wasn't the only one anymore. February brought the baby's first kicks. Leanne grabbed Caleb's hand and pressed it to her stomach so he could feel it. A tiny flutter, like a fish moving under the surface. "That's our child," she said, wonder in her voice. Caleb felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. "Yeah, that's our kid." Oh. They started preparing the second bedroom for the baby. Dutch built a cradle from scrap wood, sanded smooth and surprisingly beautiful. Leanne sewed blankets and tiny clothes. Caleb reinforced the windows and walls, making sure the room would be warm and safe. It felt like building a future in physical form. March arrived with the first hints of spring. The snow melted, revealing grass that had survived the winter, proof that the land could recover if given half a chance. Wildflowers started appearing in the fields, purple and yellow dots against the green. And then, on March 19th, everything changed. Caleb was working near the water platform when he saw riders approaching. Not Harvey this time. Marshal Thomas Grant, the territorial marshal based 3 days' ride away, along with 2 deputies. Caleb's stomach dropped. Marshals didn't show up for good news. Grant dismounted, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Caleb Mercer? That's me. I need to ask you some questions about an incident in Bridgeport 3 nights ago. There was a fire. Harvey Pike's barn burned to the ground. He's claiming you did it." "What? I was here. We haven't left the ranch in 2 weeks. Can anyone verify that?" "Dutch, my wife, but they're not exactly impartial." Grant nodded slowly. "Harvey's got 3 witnesses who say they saw you in town that night. Say they saw you near his barn an hour before it burned. They're lying, so maybe. But I've got to investigate." Grant looked toward the house where Leanne had appeared on the porch, clearly pregnant now. "That's your wife?" "Yeah. The Chinese woman everyone's been talking about." Grant studied her. "She find that water everyone says is impossible?" "She did." "Well, impressive." Grant turned back to Caleb. "Look, I'm not here to arrest you. Not yet. But I need you to come to Bridgeport tomorrow. Official questioning. Bring anyone who can verify your whereabouts that night. And if I don't come, then it looks like you're guilty, and I'll come back with more men." Grant mounted his horse. "Tomorrow, noon, county office." They rode away, leaving Caleb standing there with ice in his veins. Leanne came down from the porch. "This is Harvey." "Yeah. He is trying to get you arrested, removed from the ranch." She looked at him. "If you go to jail, I cannot run this place alone. Not in my condition. We would lose everything. If I don't go, they'll arrest me anyway." Dutch joined them. "I'll testify. Tell them Caleb was here all week. Harvey's got 3 witnesses saying otherwise. They'll call you biased." Caleb felt trapped. Every direction led to disaster. Then Leanne said, "We need to prove Harvey's witnesses are lying. Need evidence that shows Caleb could not have been in town. How? I do not know yet. But we have until tomorrow to figure it out." She headed towards the house. "Come, we think." They spent the evening going over every detail of the past 2 weeks. What Caleb had been doing, when, with whom. But it was all ranch work, witnessed only by Leanne and Dutch. Nothing that would convince a court. Around midnight, Tom Chen showed up at the door, breathing hard like he'd ridden fast. "I know who really burned Harvey's barn," he said. Everyone turned to stare. "How?" Caleb demanded. "Because I saw him, Billy Sutton. He was drunk at the saloon earlier that night, bragging about how his Uncle Harvey was going to teach you a lesson. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Billy's always running his mouth. But later, I saw him riding toward Harvey's ranch carrying a can of kerosene." "Why didn't you report this?" "Because I'm Chinese, Caleb. My word means nothing to most people in this valley." Tom sat down heavily. "But I'll testify anyway. Tell the marshal what I saw. Maybe it'll be enough." "Harvey will destroy you for that," Leon said quietly. "Probably." Tom smiled tiredly. "But I'm tired of staying quiet while good people get crushed. You two have been helping anyone who needs it, no matter what it costs you. Time someone returned the favor. The next day, they rode into Bridgeport together. Caleb, Leon, Dutch, and Tom. The county office was packed with people, Harvey and his supporters on one side, everyone else scattered nervously throughout. Marshal Grant conducted the questioning formally. Harvey's 3 witnesses testified they'd seen Caleb in town the night of the fire. Their descriptions were detailed, confident, damning. Then Tom testified. He told what he'd seen. Billy Sutton, drunk and angry, carrying kerosene toward Harvey's barn. The timeline that put Billy at the scene right before the fire started. Harvey shot to his feet. That's a lie. Billy was with me all night. Funny, Tom said, because I also saw you passed out drunk in the saloon at that time. So unless Billy was passed out next to you, he wasn't with you at all. The room erupted, Harvey shouting denials. Billy trying to slip out the back. Marshal Grant's deputies stopping him. Grant held up his hands. Everyone shut up! The room quieted. Grant looked at Tom. You're willing to swear to this under oath? Yes, sir. Even knowing what it might cost you in this town? Yes, sir. Grant nodded slowly. Then he looked at Billy. You want to tell me your side of this? Billy's face had gone pale. I don't have to say anything. No, you don't. But your uncle just claimed you were with him, and this gentleman just put you at the scene of the fire, right? Grant moved closer to Billy. Someone's lying. Either it's you and your uncle, or it's Mr. Chen. What's it going to be? Billy broke, started babbling about how Harvey had told him to frame Caleb, how they'd planned it together, how the fire was supposed to look like an accident but got out of control. Harvey tried to run. The deputies caught him at the door. In the chaos that followed, Caleb just sat there, trying to process that they'd actually won, that Harvey had finally made the mistake Leon predicted angry people make. Marshal Grant arrested both Harvey and Billy on the spot. Arson, filing false reports, conspiracy to frame an innocent man. Both of them would face territorial court in the capital. As they were being led away in handcuffs, Harvey looked at Caleb with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, Ian, Caleb said. You're done. Outside, Tom was surrounded by a few other Chinese workers from the valley, all looking shocked that one of their own had stood up publicly like that. Martha Hendricks stood nearby, face twisted with fury at seeing her allies defeated. But there were others too. The families Caleb and Leon had helped over the winter, smaller ranchers who'd been intimidated by Harvey for years. They didn't say much, but they nodded, shook Caleb's hand, thanked Tom. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was something. Recognition, maybe. Respect. Riding home, Leon said, What will happen to Harvey? Depends on the court, but with Billy testifying against him, probably prison. Good. She shifted in the saddle, one hand on her stomach. The baby is moving again. Want to stop and rest? No, I want to go home. She looked at the landscape around them, still recovering from the drought, but recovering. I want to see our ranch. Their ranch. Not Caleb's ranch that she happened to live on. Theirs. April brought the baby. Leon's water broke in the middle of the night. Caleb panicked. Dutch rode like hell to get the doctor from Bridgeport. And for 12 hours, everything was chaos and fear and Leon screaming in pain. Caleb held her hand through all of it, remembering Sarah's labor, remembering how it had ended and trying desperately not to imagine the same thing happening again. But Leon was strong, stubborn. She pushed and screamed and cursed in Chinese and English, and finally, at dawn, the baby came. A girl, tiny and perfect and screaming loud enough to wake the dead. The doctor cleaned her up and handed her to Leanne, who looked exhausted and triumphant, and more beautiful than Caleb had ever seen her. We have a daughter, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yeah. Caleb touched the baby's tiny hand, watched her fingers curl around his. We do. They named her Sarah May Mercer. Sarah for Caleb's first wife, May for Leanne's mother. A bridge between two worlds, two cultures, two people who'd loved and lost and found each other in the aftermath. She had Caleb's eyes and Leon's black hair, and a set of lungs that suggested she'd inherited stubbornness from both parents. Dutch took one look at her and said, That kid's gonna run this valley someday. Probably, Caleb agreed. News of the baby spread quickly. Some people sent gifts, quilts, baby clothes, toys carved from wood. Others sent nothing, their silence speaking volumes about how they felt about a half-Chinese child being born in Blackstone Valley. Caleb didn't care. Neither did Leanne. They had everything that mattered. May brought unexpected visitors. The territorial court had convicted Harvey Pike on all charges: 2 years in prison, forfeiture of his water rights claims, and damages owed to Caleb for the attempted framing. His ranch was being sold to cover debts, and the buyers were 3 families that Caleb and Leanne had helped through the winter. "We figured we owed you," one of them said, hat in hand, standing on Caleb's porch. "You helped us when we had nothing, so we're asking your advice on the water system, how to set things up right." Leanne emerged from the house carrying baby Sarah, who was wide awake and looking around with curious eyes. "You set up a cooperative," Leanne said. "Share resources, share labor, share knowledge. That is how you survive drought. Together, not competing. You'd help us design it?" "Ye is Of course." She looked at Caleb. "We help anyone who asks sincerely. That was always the plan." Over the following months, they did exactly that. Helped other ranches build water systems based on Leanne's engineering principles. Taught them how to read the land, find hidden water, work with what they had instead of giving up. Some families refused the help, too proud or too prejudiced, but most accepted gratefully. The valley started changing, not quickly, not perfectly, but slowly, undeniably, it changed. By summer, the Mercer Ranch had become something of a gathering place. Families would stop by to ask advice, trade goods, share news. Tom Chen brought Chinese workers from neighboring territories, helped them find work with the ranchers who'd learned that competence mattered more than skin color. Martha Hendricks and her church committee stayed hostile, but their influence had waned. One July evening, Caleb stood on his porch watching the sun set over fields that were actually thriving now. Cattle grazing, crops growing, the water system running smoothly. Then sat beside him with Sarah in her arms, the baby nursing contentedly. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Caleb asked. "Going somewhere easier? Somewhere you wouldn't have to fight for every inch of respect?" Leanne thought about it. "Sometimes. When people stare at Sarah like she is some kind of exotic creature. When they whisper about us in town." She paused. "But then I remember what we built here. What we survived. And I realize that easy places do not make you stronger. They make you softer. So you want to stay?" I want to stay. This is our land, our home. Our daughter will grow up knowing that her parents fought for something and won. That they refused to quit even when everyone said they should. She looked at him. That is worth more than easy acceptance in some other valley. Dutch wandered over, carrying the bottle of whiskey that had somehow never quite emptied. "You two getting philosophical again?" "Always," Caleb said. "Well, stop it. Come see what I found." Dutch led them to the North Ridge where they'd originally dug for water. Someone had placed a marker there. A wooden sign carved with simple words. Mercer's Spring, discovered by stubbornness and faith, 1887. "Who put that there, Sian?" Leanne asked. "Don't know. Showed up this morning." Dutch grinned. "But I like it." Caleb studied the marker, thinking about everything it represented. The 7 days of digging, the broken tools. The moment water had burst from stone when everyone said it was impossible. "Faith is the wrong word," he said. "What would you call it?" Leanne asked. "Refusal. We refused to believe we were beaten. Refused to accept that the land was dead. Refused to quit even when quitting would have been easier." He looked at his wife and daughter. "That's not faith. That's just being too stubborn to surrender." "That is the most American thing you have ever said," Leon replied, smiling. They walked back to the house together as darkness fell, Sarah sleeping now in her mother's arms. Inside there was dinner to prepare, diapers to change, 100 small tasks that made up the life they'd built. It wasn't perfect. Harvey's supporters still caused occasional problems. The drought still threatened to return. Sarah would grow up facing prejudice because of who she was. There were no guarantees, no promises that everything would work out, but they had each other. They had water. They had land that was alive again. They had a future that looked different from anything Caleb had imagined when he'd first signed those papers bringing a stranger across the ocean to marry him. That night, lying in bed with Leon curled against his side, Caleb thought about Sarah, his first wife, buried under a dead cottonwood tree. He'd spent years believing he'd failed her by letting the ranch die. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe the real failure would have been giving up entirely. Sarah had believed the valley could be beautiful. That belief hadn't saved her, but it had survived her, lived on in Caleb's stubborn refusal to walk away. And now, somehow, it had grown into something even she might not have imagined. A ranch saved by a Chinese woman's engineering knowledge, a marriage built on desperation that became love, a child who represented both everything the valley feared and everything it could become. "What are you thinking about?" Leon murmured sleepily. "That Sarah would have liked you." "You think so?" "Yeah, she would have respected your strength. Probably would have thought you were crazy for marrying me, but she'd have respected it." Leon laughed quietly. "I am crazy for marrying you, but it is the good kind of crazy." "Is there a good kind?" "The kind that saves lives, finds water, builds futures from nothing." She pressed closer. "That kind of crazy is worth keeping." Outside, the wind moved through grass that shouldn't exist after 3 years of drought. Water flowed through channels that a woman from across an ocean had designed using knowledge passed down from her father. And in a cradle beside the bed, a baby girl slept, completely unaware that her very existence was a revolution. The valley would keep changing, slowly and imperfectly. Some people would accept it, others would fight it. But the Mercer Ranch would keep standing, keep thriving, keep proving that impossible just meant you hadn't worked hard enough yet. And years later, when Sarah Mae Mercer was old enough to understand, her parents would tell her the story about a drought that should have killed them, about a woman in red who crossed an ocean carrying engineering secrets, about a widower who'd lost everything and found it again in the most unexpected way, about 7 days of digging in solid rock and water bursting forth when everyone said it was impossible. They'd tell her that the world would try to make her feel like she didn't belong anywhere. Too Chinese for the Americans, too American for the Chinese. But belonging wasn't something you waited for someone to give you. It was something you built with your own hands, on your own terms, with people who refused to quit when things got hard. They'd tell her that her mother had once said broken tools don't mean broken people, that stubbornness can be a virtue when applied to the right fights, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to accept that you're beaten. And they'd tell her that she was born from that refusal. From two people who shouldn't have succeeded but did anyway, who were mocked and threatened and told they'd never belong, but built a life worth living despite it all. That was the truth of Blackstone Valley. Not the easy myth of taming wilderness through strength and courage, but the harder truth that survival meant adapting, learning, accepting help from unexpected places. That the Chinese woman everyone called a mistake knew more about finding water than anyone born in the valley. That strength came in forms people didn't always recognize until it saved them. The rain came again to Blackstone Valley eventually. Not that year or the next, but eventually. And when it did, people would remember the drought years, remember who survived and how. Remember that the green grass and flowing water they took for granted had almost disappeared forever. But mostly, they'd remember a ranch on the North Ridge, a couple who refused to quit, and a child born from stubbornness and love who carried within her the promise that impossible just meant not yet. Caleb Mercer fell asleep that night with his wife in his arms and his daughter breathing softly nearby. And for the first time in years, he dreamed of the future instead of the past. The valley had almost killed them, but they'd killed the valley's certainty that some people didn't belong. And in doing so, they'd built something that would outlast Harvey Pike's hatred, Martha Hendrick's judgment, and every drought the land could throw at them. They'd built a home, a real one. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. And that was enough.